Om Agyana Timrandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya. Let me start again. There's no point doing invocations unless the mind is deeply, using the words to enter a deep place of surrender to the teachers and Ishvara. Otherwise, parrots could get moksha without knowing what they were saying. Om Agyana Timrandasya. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, from a kind of, I know we like to think babies are little angels from heaven, but from the yoga point of view of understanding one is Atman, when we're born, we're not in that state, much as we like to idealize babyhood and the innocence of babyhood. There actually is no innocence, because that baby's bringing a chitta with infinite past lives of experience engraved. It's just that they're all covered by tamas. So at that point, there's different. I've read 7 years before a baby starts to be a moral agent and make karma. I've read 7 years, and I think I read somewhere else 14 years. So I don't know, obviously there's difference of some texts say different things. But anyway, Om Agyana Timrandasya. I was born in the darkness of ignorance. Tamas, remember, we're using the language of what does ignorance mean in a yoga context. Om Agyana Timrandasya. Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Umilitam Yena. To the one who touched my eyes with the mascara of knowledge. Literally, it's actually not the mascara, but the stick that is used for, it doesn't matter. The stick that's used to put mascara. So I'm just making things convoluted. So I was born in the darkness of ignorance. To the one who opened my eyes with the mascara of knowledge, Tasmai, to that one, Shri Gurave, to that guru, Namaha. So the guru opens our eyes with the mascara of knowledge. It's a beautiful metaphor, the spiritual eyes. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Ite Namine. That's a invocation to Bhaktivedanta Swami, who was the founder of the Krishna movement. I never met him, but his books, sort of, when I read in the 70s, that completely and utterly opened up the spiritual world to me, the spiritual possibilities to me, the universe of spiritual possibilities, particularly bhakti. So I consider him my first guru. That kind of a guru who kind of points you to the way is called a Guru Vartama Pradarshika, the one who points you to the path. It's not necessarily your initiating guru or your shiksha guru, your instructing guru. There's different kinds of gurus. So 3 of them are kind of prominent. The Guru Vartama Pradarshika is the one who points you the way. That could be just someone you meet for 5 minutes even. But points you the way. So all of a sudden just opens up this possibility. That's the Vartama, the path, Pradarshaka, illuminator of the path. Then there's the Diksha Guru, which is the formal guru that one takes initiation into a traditional lineage. And that's only one. You only take one of those. And then there's the Shiksha Guru, the teaching guru. And you can have many teaching gurus. I mean, even dogs can be a Shiksha Guru in their own way. They can teach you faithfulness. They can teach you, friendship. And everything has a quality that can be instructive. The tree can teach tolerance. Think of how trees just stand there and accept their fate. So, but the Diksha Guru is one, and typically then there are lineages in India, and one, if one wishes to follow a traditional path of yoga, then the system would be to accept a teacher in a lineage, and the idea being that the knowledge is being handed down. It's not just someone speculating and just coming up with their own wisdom claims, but that could be right or wrong, but there's a sense of security if claims have been handed down over the millennia, or certainly many centuries, and been affirmed and reaffirmed by great beings in the lineage. So there's a sense of security. when a claim, if it's just a solitary person making a claim, well, why should we believe one solitary person out of the billions and billions of people that have lived in human society, recorded in human literature? Why should we just believe one person that sort of pops out and says, oh, Eureka, I have found the truth? I mean, maybe he or she has, can't deny the possibility, but in terms of placing faith, at least in India, the vast majority of seekers have felt it more secure to place their faith in a lineage that survived the test of time, many centuries, and been reaffirmed by generation after generation of not just theologians and intellectuals, but heavy-duty practitioners that have abandoned everything, gone off to the forests and so forth, and come out and confirmed these truths. So therefore, that's your Diksha Guru. If you connect to a lineage like that, that would be your Diksha Guru. So Bhaktivedanta Swami is not my Diksha Guru, but Guru Varma Pradarshika, the one who first put me on the path. Yeah, I have mixed feelings, there's certain things that I'm uncomfortable with, but I've reached a point where I can overlook those and be grateful for the gift that I did receive, which was bhakti, to the Vrindavan bhakti. If you focus on the Vrindavan bhakti aspect of Bhaktivedanta Swami's teachings, and bracket the social and cultural and all of that, which is just overlays that reflect 19th century Bengal, really. If you can bracket those, then there's genuine Vraj Bhakti there. So therefore, I do my namaha. I have a debt of gratitude. So, Akanda Mandalakaram, Yena Vyaptam Characharam, Tat Padam Darshitam Yena, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. So I offered that to Haridas Shastri, who was my Diksha Guru, and he's a Babaji in the Vrindavan tradition, and just, the quintessential Vrindavan Baba. If you want to get a sense of what that looks like, you can go on my website. I think if you go in the link about Edwin, and then at the bottom, I don't know if it's there or somewhere there's a link to Edwin's guru. I think it's a 2-minute clip. Somebody took a video of it when I don't even know if he knew it was being taken. So you can get a sense of what no one knows how old he was, because he's from that generation. He didn't keep records, but turn of the century, last century. So it'd have been well into his 90s, maybe he was very old. So that's a Baba, okay? Not just the hair is a dreadlock, the beard is just knotted, just a total renunciate, Vairagi, right? You know what Vairagya is, right? From the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, what's a Nirodha? It is Nirodha Abhyasa Vairagya Abhyam Tan Nirodha. So Vairagya, so a person who does Vairagya to an extreme, it's called a Vairagi in Sanskrit. So if you want to see what a Vairagi looks like, then you can click on that. Of course, at the end of his life, his disciples, bought him a rope bed, one of those 4 bits of wood with rope, Indian beds, and a couple of funky old blankets. So a little bit of attention was paid. He refused it right till the very end, but then towards the very end, he accepted a little bit of a blanket, maybe 2 blankets. All right. So Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. That's an invocation to Sri Chaitanya, amazing, charismatic, lover of Krishna. If you want to get a sense of what the ultimate stages of love of God look like in this world, in a mind, within a body in this world, then you might want to read the story of Sri Chaitanya. So the lineage that comes from him considers him to be an incarnation of Krishna. One can accept that or not, but there is no doubt that he exhibited astonishing, and at this point we're in the historical record. We're in the 16th century. Obviously, Krishna is beyond any kind of historical reconstruction. How are you going to try to reconstruct Krishna? What are you going to dig and look for a peacock feather that's 5,000 years old? Good luck with that. What, a flute? Are you going to look for a flute? Good luck with that. so that's be outside of the jurisdiction of our modern methods of reconstructing history, right? Which is a literary record, archaeological record, linguistics, and these other disciplines. But Sri Chaitanya is smack, well within this sort of historical, and we have references to Chaitanya from Islamic sources, because he was in Bengal, so that was the Islamic Caliphate, and we have plenty of we have sufficient references to know. Obviously, you're never going to know if he was an incarnation of Krishna or not, but you can certainly know he was a charismatic. So that's an invocation to Sri Chaitanya. And he was the one that revealed sort of Braj Bhakti to his disciples, the 6 Goswamis. So that I consider that to be a new revelation. Of course, his disciples, you can't say something is a new revelation because that's not the Vedanta system. Vedanta system is not, you don't accept new revelation. So you have to go out and discover references to anything that you're presenting, which to anybody else is a new theology, but you have to find references in the gamut of Sanskrit literature. And his disciples set about that with an incredible erudition. His 6 Goswamis, and we read the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu together in our last workshop. So there was just a vast, amazing storehouse of literature that came down through Chaitanya. Didn't only wrote 8 verses, but his disciples, some of which a lot of which was attempting to establish this new revelation by showing how it really scattered throughout the Sanskrit texts. You probably won't be convinced of that if you were outside the lineage, but whether you're inside or outside the lineage, no one can deny the incredible erudition of the Goswamis. They had a dharma to do. Their dharma was to show that this Braj Bhakti that's what Vedanta, you can't make new stuff up, my friends. You have to, everything you say, you have to somehow link it back to the Vedic corpus, the Upanishads and the Vedic corpus and the Shruti and the Smriti. But the Smriti has to be linked to the Shruti. The latest traditions all have to be linked. They have to find some anchor, some peg within the Upanishads. That's what it means to be a Vedantin. You can't make stuff up. If you're going to make stuff up, you go off and do your own thing, like Guru Nanak, and you start Sikhism or the Buddha, and you start Buddhism and so forth. And that's fine. You can do that. But then you can't call yourself Vedika. If you want to call yourself Vedika, for whatever that's worth, then you have to, everything you say has to be, you have to find a way of linking it to the Shruti, the ancient texts that were heard. So Sri Chaitanya, Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu, Dinabandhu, Jagatpate, Gopesha, Gopika Kanta, Radha Kanta, Namostate. I'll tell you what that means next month, if you remind me. Next week. Tapta Kanchana Gourange Radhe, Vrindavaneshwari, Vrishabhanu Sute Devi, Pranamami Hare Priye, Srimati Radharani. I think we spoke about her last time. Apavitra Pavitro Va, Sarvavasthagatopi Va, Yasmaret Pundarikaksham Sa Bhayabhyantara Shuchihe. And what does it matter if Sri Chaitanya is an incarnation of Krishna or he isn't? Who cares? If he can deliver Krishna, if we seek Vraj Bhakti and Sri Chaitanya can deliver Vraj Bhakti, well, what do we care about the claims to divinity or not? That's just a sectarian concern. Why should that be a concern to us, a seeker of Vraj Bhakti? Okay. All right, my friends. And the story of Bharata. And I think you'll enjoy this one. This is a real story. Plenty of jnana, plenty of bhakti, but a story. Last week we had, well, I missed a cool bit last week. I made a mistake. It starts off with, I think I told you, Kapila and is born of Devahuti and Kardama. And there's a bit of a racy bit where Kardama is a great sage. And he says to his wife, okay, they're brahmacharis together. She's the daughter of an empress and he's a great sage and they're brahmacharis. But I believe she was ordered to have offspring. We'll have to revisit that bit. But anyway, at some point she approaches him for offspring and he says, okay, but when the child is born, then I will take sannyas. And if you agree to that, then we can unite. And she agreed. So then they have this amazing sex life. He manifests 9, because out of his mystic power, he manifests 9 kardamas, and so she is, shall we say, fully satisfied. At least that's the way that the text is presenting. He does this for her pleasure, and so he manifests this amazing aerial, just out of his mystic power, palace. A bit like if you read Autobiography of a Yogi, and Lahiri Mahasai and Paramahansa's, not Lahiri Mahasai, but Nityananda, the mystic that's supposed to be hundreds of years old. Well, if you read that, supposedly he manifested this sort of amazing crystal palace out of, it's been a while since I read that in the 60s, but anyway, something a bit like that. So the mystic, so he created this amazing sort of love place of love. So we missed that bit. Maybe we should have started off with that. I don't know. I guess that's just to sort of entice the reader into the story. And then she gets pregnant with Kapila, who is born instantly because he's Vishnu, and Kardama leaves for the forest. And so now she has her son, who's really Vishnu. And then he's the founder of Sankhya, and then he imparts Sankhya to her. And so that was the story, but we missed all the narrative outer structure. But not this one. We're gonna read the story. So Bharata, and by the way, the traditional name for India is not Hindustan. The word Hindu doesn't appear before the 15th century. As a matter of fact, we were just talking about Chaitanya. The first time the word Hindu appears, it's in the hagiography of Chaitanya that was written shortly after he passed away, called the Chaitanya Charitamrita. That's the first time we see the word Hindu. So Hindu is not a Sanskrit word. So one of the traditional names for India is Bharat. So if you go to India, not Bombay or Delhi, they won't know what you're talking about. If you go to a traditional place, Varanasi, Rishikesh, the Pandits, and you say Bharat, then they like that, because that's the traditional name for Bharatavarsha. And there's 3 Bharats, and differences of opinion about which of the 3 the country is named after. But here's one, Bharat, great devotee of Lord Vishnu. Excuse me, was dedicated to ruling the earth. He was the sort of world emperor of the known world. And the known world back then, Bharat, well, they did know, there's reference to the Chinese, there's reference to the Greeks. They're called Yavanas, which is a Sanskritization of Ionia. So Ionia in Sanskrit becomes Yavana, Ionia, Yavana. And that's what it originally meant. And then so there's reference to the Yavanas and the Chinas, the Chinese, and the Hunas, the Huns, and so forth. But anyway, so Bharata, a great devotee of Lord Vishnu, was dedicated to ruling the earth, whatever that meant for them. When he was deliberating on how to govern it, on the order of his father, Bhagavan Rishabhadev, he took as his wife Panchajani, the daughters of Vishvarupa. Okay. So, here we are. This continent was previously named Janabham, but since the time of Bharata, they designated it Bharata. So I told you there were 3 Bharatas, and there's different opinion as to which one it's named after. But the Bhagavata Purana claims it is named after this Bharata here. I think the Mahabharata may make a different kind of claim. Doesn't matter. It's all cool. All these different references are just awesome. We don't care. What we want to do is absorb our mind in the teachings. We're not going to nitpick. Like, that's so silly. You can if you're a critical scholar, then you nitpick. But if you are a bhakta seeking truth, then it doesn't matter. Actually, that's how the entire academic study of religion started, really, after the Enlightenment. People compared the Gospels and said, oh, well, it says this here, and it says there's a different one over there. And the date, Matthew says this, and John says something completely different. And that's how scripture gets demoted. It gets demoted from a paramount, the highest source of knowledge. And sometimes it's called the age of reason, right? Enlightenment, when reason displaces scripture. And as a result, then the scripture is not thrown out, but it is subject to human reason. So it's pulled apart, and all the inconsistencies and idiosyncrasies and all of the, conflicts between one text and another are. That's it. That's all good stuff. I'm not putting that down, but it's not of supreme interest to the yogi. The yogi's not a little bit of intellectual interest, fine, but the yogi's looking for bhav. Either you're looking for Atman or you're looking for prema. In which case, that's what you're going to be. You're going to have your magnifying glass is going to be on that. And these other little sorts of details. Well, Bharata here is, India's named after this Bharata, and the Mahabharata says another Bharata. It's going to be, it's not going to be of great interest. So Lord of the Earth had vast knowledge. Following his own dharma of the Kshatriya warrior, the king, he governed the citizens with great affection, just as his father and grandfather had done. Of course, this is monarchy, enlightened monarchy. It's considered to be the best form of governance. Enlightened monarchy. If you could actually guarantee enlightened monarchy, obviously it's the best, because democracy, the problem with democracy, lots of problems with democracy, but one is there's no truthfulness. It's almost like you have to lie to in a democratic system, because you have to get the maximum amount of votes. So you have to say what people want to hear, and they have to say what the maximum amount of people want to hear. So you can't be honest. So therefore, it may be the best system we have on the planet today, but the Puranas would say that's a major problem of that sort of and plus the citizens, if the citizens are unenlightened, what kind of a leader are they going to elect? So therefore, the Puranas take the view that enlightened monarchy. Of course, then the problem is, well, what happens when the monarchs are not enlightened, and that's why democracy emerges. So I'm not in any way undermining that democracy is necessary in this day and age. But as in terms of an ideal, take it or leave it, Puranas would say enlightened monarchy. And it comes down in this family lineage, father, grandfather, and they were all following their dharmas. If there really is dharma, that's honesty, not cheating, renunciation, all of that, that would be the dharma of the king. So enjoyed in this way for 10 million years. all right. So try telling that to a local historian. 10 million years. All right. In which time, he, in other words, a very long time, my friends, at which time he perceived that the appropriate moment for to extinguish his karma had arrived. What was it? How did he perceive it? Well, how about white hair on the head? How about his body's getting achy? Those are the signs. Some of us are many of us are experiencing that. At this point, he divided among his sons his personal wealth, bestowed by his father and grandfather, his kingdom and the treasury, according to the norms of inheritance, right? The dharmas, according to the traditions back then. He then set out from home, the abode of all kinds of opulence, to the holy place, Pulaha. So you go to a holy place. Why? Because it's, well, saturated with a lot of tapas of previous meditators, and it's associated with some very auspicious, maybe some incarnation appeared there, or something very divine happened there. So it's a holy place. We all know what a holy place is. Actually, even today, out of affection, Lord Hari appears his devotees who reside there in that place in whatever form they desire. This is an important principle of bhakti, my friends. Bhakti, Ishvara, Hari will appear in whatever form we desire. We just have to desire Ishvara and just open up our hearts to these forms. We've been indoctrinated to think it's all mythology, well, whatever the heck came back from the colonial period. The interpretations of Hinduism, they're still lingering about. Whatever form, why can't God have a form? If God's going to be beautiful, he must have a form. Beauty is form. And that's not a limitation. There's infinite forms. Find your form, my friends. Find your form of Ishvara. How do you find that? Read the stories and see which one captures your heart. If you open up your heart to Ishvara, Ishvara will capture your heart. That's all you have to do. Don't have to go running around fretting. Just open your heart to Ishvara, and Ishvara will come in a form. How hard is that? You just have to be sincere. So Bharata lived alone in the grove around that place known as ashrama. And notice the word ashrama in these old texts doesn't mean like what nowadays we think of ashrams as big communities with buildings and such. It's just a mud hut on the banks of a river. We saw that with the Parikshit story when he entered and put the snake around the neck of the meditating, not Shonaka, what was his name? It begins with an S. Shamika. 4 bamboo poles and mud, and maybe some thatched, mud walls and so forth. He lived alone. Ashram means you live alone. Mud hut where you live alone. Sorry, I just had to drink, a bit dehydrated. He dedicated himself to the worship of Lord Vishnu. So he did puja. What can you offer? He's living in the forest. Well, you can find things to offer. You just find the best things that at your disposal. That's bhakti. There's no principle you have to offer this, that, and the other. The principle is you offer the best thing that you have access to. Well, what is he have access to? Flowers, shoots, tulsi leaves, water. I must have some water about, otherwise you'd be dead. So, and look at it, bulbs. He offers bulbs, nice, yummy bulbs, roots and fruits. This is the life of the tapasvin. And we can, we can head in this direction by living simply, eating frugally. We can all head in this direction. Detached from desires for sense objects, right? This is nothing other than vairagya. He cultivated peacefulness of mind and attained ultimate bliss. So he did sattva and eventually did his chitta vritti nirodha, and he attained svarupe vasthanam, sutra number 3. He had an experience of his own Atman. Important. You've heard me say it again. This story is going to show how the experience of your own Atman is not the ultimate end, grand finale. So the text is going to say he's attained that which the yogis seek. He had attained that which the jnanis seek, and he attained all the experiences that are claimed for that state: blissfulness, satchit, ananda, and so forth. By such uninterrupted worship of the supreme being, Bharata became calm. When you surrender to him, the more you surrender, now we're not talking about deep level bliss, we're just talking about mental state, prakriti mind, but it becomes peaceful and calm. Right? No, obviously not the end, obviously not the final goal, but a pretty nice, it's a relief from constant anxiety and fear and paranoia and so forth, just to have a calm mind, my friends. But from bhakti, his heart melted from the surge of his growing love for God. It grows and it grows and it grows and it grows, and it surpasses any interest in the bliss of the self. That love takes you away out of your nirbija samadhi, pulls you out of that, and just attracts you to this ever-growing higher type of love, bliss that comes from love of Bhagavan. And what are the symptoms of that? All the hair on his body was seen to stand on end due to the force of his ecstasy, the force, the shakti. The body's not equipped to deal with it. It blows. I always give the example of an electrical appliance. You take it to Europe, it blows. It's a different kind of current, blows it. Body's not meant to handle love of God, so it blows. Well, what does that mean? Well, tears pour out, or the fluids go mad, the hair stands on end, water comes out of your eyes, right? His vision becomes obstructed by tears of affection caused by his contemplation. His intelligence was absorbed in his heart. We know the heart is the locus of the mind and the Atman, which was like a deep lake overflowing with supreme bliss, greater than the bliss of the Atman. This is the ultimate bliss. It comes from what? From his devotional practices of ever increasing meditating on the red, lotus-like feet of his beloved Lord, right? So Hari is coming to him in the form of Vishnu. That's his beloved Lord. For some of us, it's Krishna. For some of us, it's Shiva. For some of us, it's Devi. These are all wonderful forms of Ishvara and Ishvari. In this state, he even sometimes forgot the very service to the Lord that he was supposed to be performing. He's in the middle of doing puja, and he gets overwhelmed by bhav. You remember bhav if you took the course on the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rasamrita Sindhu. Let me say that properly. Rasamrita Sindhu. And that bhav, it means love. It's like a surge of ecstatic emotional feeling. And it just takes over his mind, and he's halfway through offering his ghee and his incense, and he forgets about it. He just gets stunned. He gets stunned. Just like all living entities got stunned when Krishna plays his flute. The calves are drinking milk, and it just says, and they just stand there with their mouth open, and the milk is just dripping out of their mouth and dripping out of the udder. The mother is stunned, like some statue in the Vatican Museum, totally stunned with ecstasy, the sound of Krishna's flute. So he's getting a bit of that. So Shukra goes on. Remember, Shukra is telling this whole story to Parikshit, 7 days fasting, right? Got cursed. We'll remember the story if you were here for the first session. Now, once after finishing his customary duties, taking his bath in the great river, Bharata sat down on the water bank reciting the sacred syllable Om, right? So Om, Patanjali says, Tasyavachikaha pranavaha, Ishvara comes as Om, Tajapa Tadartha Bhavanam. You do japa, right? Recitation of Om, right? Krishna says twice in the Gita, I am Om, I am Om. So he does it for 3 muhurtas, 2.5 hours. My friends, if you can't spare 2.5 hours, then start with 20 minutes and then move on to 30 minutes and then 45 minutes. And then when you can on the weekend, you do more. But every day, who can't do 20, 30 minutes? Of course you can. Just spend half an hour less on email and texting or whatever. So there he is. Om is the absolute truth, Brahman, manifest as sound, right? We know that right from the earliest Upanishads. Okay, now we're going to start the story. This is a story about reincarnation. Excuse me while I drink something. Just at that very moment, just then, O king, a deer arrived at that body of water at that spot, desiring to drink. Just at the very moment that she was drinking the water, the fierce sound of a lion's roar bursts forth nearby, striking terror in all creatures. So she's trapped. She's got the lion behind her, the water in front of her. Nowhere to turn. The doe was timid by nature. When she heard that sound of the lion, her heart immediately became alarmed. Her thirst was pushed aside, right? The fear overcame the desire of the thirst desire. And her eyes became restless with trembling glances. Overwhelmed by fear of the lion, she suddenly leapt up in terror. What's she supposed to do? So she just leaps wildly and blindly, right? The lion's behind her. At that particular moment, that seemed more dangerous than the water in front of her. So she leaps, but now she's in midair. And the deer happened to be pregnant. The embryo dislodged due to her great fear, right? So she gave birth in midair by the trauma of the leap and the fear. So the embryo pops out, emerged from her womb, and fell into the waters. Separated, so she lands on the other side where the king is sitting. He's kind of witnessing this. Separated from her herd and traumatized by exhaustion and fear, as well as by the leap and the birth, the black doe then dropped down dead in some cave. So she staggers off, lost her baby, traumatized, doesn't know what happened, absolutely exhausted, delivered the baby, and she just falls dead. She staggers off to a safe place and dies. So the kingly sage Bharata saw all of this. He saw that the deer's offspring had been discharged by its parent and was being helplessly carried away by the current. So what's he going to do? He has a kingly nature, right? And the kingly nature means for his whole life, he has been trained by his father, his grandfather, that your dharma, your dharma is to protect. You have to protect the citizens, you have to protect the vulnerable, you have to protect the elderly, you have to protect those who are less, that are suffering, and that includes all beings. So that's his mental makeup in this particular life. He knows that's the enlightened king. That's the dharma of the king, is to protect. And sometimes even the etymology of the word kshatriya means to protect from fear. So what's he going to do? He's a yogi now. So he's renounced all of those, he's renounced his dharmas. But what is he going to do? He's witnessing this in front of his eye, right in front of him. So with the compassion of what's he going to do? With a well-wishing soul, he lifted it out and took it to his ashram or hermitage, understanding that it was motherless. You can see where this is going to go now. Indeed, Bharata became personally extremely attached. He starts to become attached. By the way, the story doesn't tell you what he should have done. It's interesting. So we'd have to speculate from a yogic point of view. We'll read the story first and see where it ends up. And then we can speculate, well, what should he have done? But we'll let's put that on hold for now, that question. You can think about it, perhaps, as we read. But he becomes extremely attached to the deer's offspring. Right, and of course the deer thinks he's her mum. Right, he picks her out. Now he's mum. The little doe looks at him and says, "Mummy." Right, the baby's never seen him. Mum went off and died. So what's the little doe going to think? Well, that's my mum. So because of his contemplating, petting, fondling, protecting, and nurturing it day by day, look at this, his spiritual practices, adherence to the moral yama vows, the yamas, and worship of the Supreme Being were discarded one by one. I'm not sure what that means. What yama vows would he have discarded? He's still celibate. I think he's still celibate. He's still non-violent. The whole act was non-violence. I think it's just being rhetorical. He doesn't really give up any yama vows. It says he does, but I can't understand which ones he would have been giving up. He's not going to give up, what is it? Ahimsa, Satya, Masteya, Aparigraha, and whatever the other one is. He's not giving those up. He's in the forest. But this is, I think, what he's giving up. The worship of the Supreme Being. They were discarded one by one. Finally, after the passing of some days, all of them were abandoned. He completely gives up now all his bhakti practices and becomes completely absorbed in the nurturing and the, we should pay attention to this, my friends with families and children. This is a message for us all. Right, not to become completely absorbed, do our dharmas. Let's see what happens to Bharat. Now, you might find this a little bit of a hard story to swallow. Well, perhaps, but it's following yogic principles. So, the king thought, alas, this helpless offspring of a deer has been separated from its friends and herd by the Lord's power of time, which is like an ever-moving chariot wheel. Time, they're always moving. It has approached me for protection. Remember, anyone approaching an enlightened king for protection, the king always has to give it, no question. Not even a king, a kshatriya, warrior. Anyone who is a real warrior has to protect anybody, even an enemy, who approaches submissively. You protect that person, you accept that submission. Let me just mute everybody, because I'm hearing a little background, probably from people who joined a bit late. How do I do that? Excuse me. Participants, mute all, mute all. Okay, so his nature as a king comes out. You know, the minute you're not in a state of pure sattva, the minute you're not in a meditative state, the minute you reconnect to your prakritic mind, well, that mind is a certain way in that particular lifetime. So he has the mind of a warrior. So when he's left his deep level immersion in the self, or his deep intense contemplation on Vishnu, then reconnects with prakritic mind, is the mind of a king. And the mind of a king is to give shelter. So immediately he slots back into that kind of the dharma of the prakritic mind. It's a different dharma. So it has approached me for protection, and it sees me as parent, brother, kinsman, and herd companion. It knows no one else and has full faith in me alone. Therefore, and this is correct for a king, not for a yogi, but for a king. Therefore, for karma yoga, all of this is karma yoga, not Patanjali yoga. Therefore, since it has taken refuge of me, it is fitting by the laws of dharma that I attend to its petting, fondling, protection, and nurture. I'm not callous, and I know the sin of neglecting one's dependents. He's been brought up in the dharma of the king. So everything he's saying here now is correct from the point of view of dharma and correct from the point of view of karma yoga, which can be practiced performing one's dharma. But it's not appropriate from the type of yoga he was doing before, which was Patanjalian, complete and utter renunciation of the world yoga, right? So the action yoga has its rules, its yogic, a kind of, it's yogic entailments, and inaction yoga has its. Okay, so he's gone from one to the other. Surely those who are noble, saintly Aryas, we know the Aryas are followers of Vedic culture, peaceful in nature and benevolent to the helpless, sacrifice their own needs, even if they are very important for a need such as this, right? Totally speaking like a enlightened king now, not as a yogi. In this way, Bharata became attached to the young deer while eating, bathing, wandering about, sleeping and sitting, and his heart became bound by affection. When he was about to go, right, completely attached and absorbed, his mind is totally absorbed in the deer now. When he was about to go and collect kusha grass, flowers, leaves, fruits, roots, or water, right, for his puja, he became apprehensive about the threat of wolves and dogs, right? I can't leave the deer alone. He's in the forest. And so he went into the forest accompanied by the young deer. We'd put it on his shoulders. When to its simple nature, the deer became stuck here or there on the trails, Bharata would carry it on his shoulder out of kindness, his heart burdened with excessive love. Similarly, he would place it on his lap or chest and experience great joy in petting it. Even while he was in the middle of performing his religious rites, the emperor, or ex-emperor, would get up midway and cast a glance at her. Right in the middle of his puja, would get up and make sure she was okay. At such times, his mind reassured, he prayed for blessings for the fawn, saying, Swastu, Swastu, Suastu, may there always be good fortune for you, right? That's a kind of a sattvic mantra, but it's not a yogi mantra. It's not a yogi mantra, the one everybody likes to chant. How does it go? Swasti, Swasti, Suasti, Sahanao Bhavatu, Sahanao Bhonaktu, Sahavirya Karavavahai. That's not a yogi mantra. So it's a sattva guna mantra. Nothing wrong with it, but let's keep our categories clear. At other times, when he could not see the forms, it goes on like this. He became like a miser who had lost his wealth when he couldn't see the fawn, pining over the fawn because of his affection and compassion. His heart would become afflicted with distress from being separated from her. Overwhelmed with intense anxiety, he then spoke as follows. So he goes mad, actually. Oh, alas, the helpless fawn, offspring of a dead doe, placed her faith in me. I've done nothing to merit this. On the contrary, I have the mentality of a deceitful Kirata hunter. Will it return? You know, he wanders off and he's just, he freaks out and he starts imagining the worst, as a parent does, bound by affection. Will I see it again, wandering tranquilly on the fresh grasses of the gardens? And he goes on, I hope no wolf or wild dog devours it. O Sun, Lord of the heavens, blah, 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 which is the soul of the three Vedas and which arises for the welfare of the entire world, is now setting, the sun is setting. It's quite poetic, but the fawn has not returned. So he goes on like this, or perhaps, and so he goes on. 21, while it was playing, it would approach me in great alarm whenever I would close my eyes in a feigned state of samadhi meditation. So now whenever he tries to close his eyes to meditate, the form would come up and nudge him. On those occasions, agitated with affection, it would strike me with the tips of its horns, soft as water drops. So he allowed the fawn to sort of, the fawn would get worried when he was in a sort of immobile state of meditation, and sort of obviously like a child would try to snap you out of it. And so on. 26, with his heart bewildered by such unsustainable delusions, manifesting in the form of the fawn. Let's all be clear what yoga philosophy said. There's an Atman in that body that's there by its karma, and there's the Atman in the body of the king, and he's, did his dharma for 50 years, and now he's followed the dharma of the Varna, the ashrama system, and he's now headed to the forest for the, maybe 75 for sannyasa. So this is what he should be doing now, is meditating. He's done his civic duties for 50 years, or certainly 25. So bewildered by such unsustainable delusions, right? Extreme attachment. So you're just imagining the worst every time you don't see your beloved object of attachment. Manifesting in the form of the fawn. It's just a form. It's just an Atman that's temporarily in a body from a yogic point of view. Due to the force of his previous karma, somehow or other, he had some kind of karma that caused this to happen. This fall down from his yogic practices. So Bharata abandoned his yogic practices. He abandoned them. His performance of yogic austerities, abandoned. And the specifics of his worship of Bhagavan, abandoned. How could this unnatural attachment to the form? Why is it unnatural? It's a member of a different species. It's not, by nature, deer hang out with deer and humans hang out with humans. That's nature. So how could they become an obstacle like this for the sage king Bharata, who had taken up the practices of yoga? Notice he'd actually attained he'd attained a vision of his own self. And he fell back down, which is interesting because in the Gita it says, if you attain that, you never fall back down. So sometimes you have these little, I won't call them contradictions, but you remember, this is all, we need to take this as a frame, a story to impart higher truths and not quibble about little details like that. We can if we want to, but then that's a bit silly. Then we might be missing the point. Right. Bharata had already renounced his own sons and his beautiful wife. How's he going to be attached to a fawn? He's already renounced his beloved wife and his own children as obstacles to the realization of the ultimate truth. And they're so difficult to give up. But yet he ended up neglecting his Atman due to his attachment to petting, pleasing, rearing, and nurturing that fawn. My friends, at the end of life, this is what it is. We have to be drastic like this if we want to cut the bond of attachment to this world that causes us to return. Take it or leave it. But that's what these texts say. Take it or leave it. But let's be clear about what where the bar is. Finally, unsurpassable death in the form of time, voracious and consuming, appeared before him like a snake before a mouse hole. Why a snake before a mouse hole? Well, that mouse scuttles into a hole, right? And the cat can't get it, but the snake can. Snake can go into any hole the mouse makes. So where's the snake going to go? He's got a hole, right? So it's just a round, you know, there's nothing, it's just a wall behind it. Can't go back because the hole is only has a certain depth. And the snake is coming in the hole. Death. At that time, gazing at, so now what happens? This is the principle of Krishna says in the Gita, yam yam vapi smaram bhavam, tyajati antikale varam, tam tam evi taro jana, sadatad bhava bhavitaha. Whatever state of mind you have at the moment of death, that's going to influence your next birth. Your state of mind rises up like the vrittis, because the vrittis are always there in the mind churning away. And the moment of death, the biggest attachments that you have are going to rise up like a tsunami wave, right? So think of the mind as wave after wave after wave. But the moment of death is a tsunami wave, because it's kind of like when you realize you're dying, then your mind is going to cling onto the thing that it's most attached to and has been most attached to throughout life. So let's call it tsunami wave. Arises up, and that then projects one, along with karma. Karma is not just what you think of at the moment of death. That also has to negotiate with karma. And that sort of, all that comes together, it creates a sort of subtle blueprint and gets injected into like a blueprint is like the blueprint of a building. So the mind at the moment of death is kind of like a blueprint that injects then the subtle body along with the Atman, which is embedded in it, gets injected into a body that is suitable for that blueprint. And in his case, well, you can guess what he was thinking of. Well, we know what he was thinking of. Let's see how that works. Let's see how that plays out here. So at the time of death, gazing at the deer who was lamenting at his side like a son, his mind completely absorbed in the deer because he was worried, who's going to look after it now? I'm dying. Bharata left this world, and with it the deer. I mean, you can be attached as you want, but you got to leave it behind, my friends. And if detachment is cruel, well, then death is cruel then. If you say, oh, it's so cruel to be, the end of life, to sever all my attachments, that's so harsh. Well, death's going to do it for you then, isn't it? So you don't have a choice in that. What you do have a choice in is you can do it before death does it for you. We can do it before death does it for us, because there's a we here. I'm exactly the same boat as you all. So we do it or we don't. But death will do it for us. If we try to do it ourselves, especially towards the end of life, break those attachments, take care of our responsibility, hand everything over to our kids. My friends, this is for real. Set your kids up, hand over your wealth, give them everything, save a little something just so you can eat simply, and then spend that last portion of life in following your practices. If you don't, you're going to get yanked out anyway. Well, where's the optionality in that? Take it or leave it. It's going to happen. So do it voluntarily and spend that last little period of life fixing the mind. That's what it's for. Why do you think the body is useless and weak at the end? To encourage that. Why do you think our body, by nature, if you accept that it's all set up with a grand design called teleology, there's a grand design to it all. If you're theistic, you believe in teleology. There's a purpose to it all. And the body gets weak. Kids kind of like don't really want to be around us very much. Kind of useless. Yeah, maybe send a check in the mail once in a while. I mean, if you've got good kids, they'll pop around, make sure you're all right once in a while. That's if you're lucky. But yeah, think about it. Everything is sort of, nobody takes you serious anymore. You're old, your teeth are falling out. You're just a kind of embarrassing. It is embarrassing presence. The older you get, who wants to be around an old person, right? So that's your friend. All of that's your friend. It's forcing you to go with him. Where else are you going to go? Where else are you going to go? Shopping in the mall. When you're 89, a walking stick, what are you going to buy? Come on, it's all designed. So at the end, we're forced to break these attachments. So if we should embrace that. All right. So what happens? So at that time, gazing at the deer who was lamenting at his side like a son, the deer is, lamenting because it's losing its benefactor and protector. His mind completely absorbed in the deer, Bharata left this world, and with it the deer. He subsequently himself obtained the body of a deer. That's how it works. He's attached to a deer, absorbed in a deer, become a deer then. However, because he was such a dharmic king, he had a lot of good karma before his yogic life, and during his yogic life, before the deer episode, he had attained great yogic levels and successes. Because of that, along with losing the dead body, he did not lose the memory of his past lives as others do. So he was just, it was a temporary hiccup, and he had this boon. Because of his great tapas, he had the siddhi that he could remember his past life. So in the next, but even though he was in a form of an animal, in the next birth, as a consequence of his previous efforts to worship God, because of the puja that he's done, Bharata was able to remember that he himself was the cause of attaining the state of a deer. He lamented profusely, alas, what misfortune. I've fallen from the path of those who have attained self-realization. He'd attained his experience of his own Atman. He fell. I've taken refuge in a sacred forest in solitude. That was the time, the last bit of life. He'd had decades to do all his worldly stuff and look after his family and protect deer. He'd had decades doing this. The last little bit of life is not for that, my friends. It's for your Atman. And he'd taken refuge in a sacred forest in solitude, freed himself from all attachments, and had realized my own Atman. Where else do you want to go with it? If you're a Patanjalian or a Jnani, that's the end of the journey, not for bhaktas, but it is for the jnana paths. He attained it all. For a long time, my mind was completely and utterly absorbed in Krishna. He's a bhakta, the inner soul of all souls. By means of the yogic practices of what is bhakti, hearing about him, reflecting on him, shravanam, kirtanam, chanting his glories, worshipping him, remembering him all the time in all possible ways. These are the processes of bhakti. You chant the names of God, you worship, you do puja, you hear about the stories, you contemplate him all the time, your little Gopal in your mind, little Gopal is in your mind the whole time. With his little chubby legs in your mind, reflecting upon him, chanting his glories, Jai Ho Bhagavan, worshipping him, remembering him all the time in all possible ways. There's infinite ways of remembering Bhagavan, my friends, in the form of sound, in the form of leelas, in the form of pictures, anything you want, deity. But I let that same mind again flow away, right? We always have free will. They have to, if we're not, unless we're machines, we have free will. So even this great elevated state, he let his mind flow away after a phone from some distant place. What a fool I am. So we could ask, what should he have done? The only answer I can give to myself would be he should have picked it up and, looked after it for a couple of days and sort of sent it off into the forest, once it was a few weeks old. I mean, what else could he do? I mean, I don't know. The phone didn't have anyone to train it to forage, but I don't know. He should have maybe just let it hang around their ashram, but without sort of petting it or fondling it. Or you can make up your own story about what he should have done. If I was in that situation, I would like to think that that's what I would have done. Picked it up, taking care of it till it could walk around, and then sort of slowly pushed it away, close by, let it sort of just be, not pet it and fondle it, but just let it be, hang around the ashram so it's a little bit protected, the human smell, and then just let it sort of grow and then wander off one day whenever it wanted to do that. But you can make up your own story. What a fool I am. In this way, his detachment from worldly objects, concealed by his birth as a deer, he was actually greatly detached before all this, but that detachment comes back. When he realizes, he applies vidya, jnana, he applies viveka to his fall down, right? We all have little fall downs. That's just probably, that's what the path is. And when you pick yourself up, when you get humiliated, you realize you're suffering, you realize you're not in a good place, and you pick yourself up, you reapply your viveka to your situation, to your condition, and just keep going on the path. Then nothing else to it. Just keep going on the path. So that's what he does. So his detachment reactivates in the mind of the deer. So he left his mother deer. He didn't want to be attached to his mother deer. And what does he do? He returned again from Kalanjara to the ashram of the sages Pulastya and Pula. He goes to their ashram. He says, let me go hang out with sages. Right? So at least I'll be in the environment of holy people. I can eat the remnants of their food. Maybe they'll be chanting and I'll be able to listen to the mantras. So he goes and hangs out to the ashram of the deer. And actually, this is what he should have done, because they probably let the deer wander about and just let it alone and let it be. And probably put some food out for it once in a while. The Pulastya and Pulaha sages. It doesn't say that, but we can infer that. It was a sacred place where the sacred Shalagram stone is found. A stone that is a manifestation of your Ishvara, and it doesn't need installation. Normally, if you have a deity, there's a certain installation process and opening of the eyes where you request the deity to kindly enter your deity so that it can receive service, right? Because you want to serve Bhagavan in a physical way. And how do you do that with an abstract, with a Bhagavan who has a form that's made of pure consciousness, that you can't see that form unless you granted a vision. So the idea of the deity is you're in a physical form made of Prakriti. So you make a physical made of Prakriti and you invite Ishvara in. Of course, Ishvara comes or doesn't come. The ritual's not going to make Ishvara enter your deity, obviously not. But if the bhakti is there, Ishvara will be attracted to the bhakti and out of grace enters your deity. And that way you can offer your deity physical things like fruits and flowers and pujas. And that's the whole point of deity worship. It's a way that we, in our embodied state, can use the reality we know, which is our prakritic reality, and we can go out into our prakritic reality. So every morning, for example, I go out and you look for the best flowers, and you get the nice tulsi, and you get the best vegetables, and you cook, and all of that, and then you offer it to your deity. That's what puja is. So in a sense, you're embodied in Ishvara out of grace. We're embodied out of karma. But Ishvara allows himself to be embodied in the deity out of kindness. And of course, because Ishvara is infinite, he can be in an infinite number of deities. Big temple deities in South India, or your little humble deity on your kitchen shelf. So that's what puja is. You can think of it that way. I'm embodied by karma, and therefore, I can only do prakritic things. I can only pick up prakritic things with my prakritic hands. I can only see prakritic things with my prakritic eyes. I'm trapped in this prakritic set of instruments called the body. But I want to worship my Bhagavan with the instruments that I have and the senses that I have and the body that I have. And I want to do it in creative ways. I like to play music. I like to dance. I like to sing. I like to paint. So your deity, you can offer all that to your deity. Very, very, very intimate, my friends. If you take it that way, it's Bhagavan in your house. You don't eat until your Bhagavan is eaten. You put your Bhagavan to sleep at night. It's like having a child. Then you're never lonely. If you live alone, you'll never be lonely. So what a fool I am. So he goes and hangs out with the ashram. It's a place favored by groups of tranquil-minded sages, subsisting on dry leaves, grass, and plants, and with only his own Atman as companion. It's a nice way of putting the life of a solitary yogi. Your companion is Atman. If you're a bhakta, of course, your companion is Bhagavan. So Bharata now awaited death in that place, right? The second round of death. Of course, he's had infinite deaths in infinite lives, but right in the story now, the second death in the story. And he's very fearful of developing any attachments, right? Immediately he can walk, he leaves his mother. Counting the days until his deliverance from the karma, he has to burn up, and this is what Jati Ayu Bhoga Patanjali says. What is karma? Where's your karma? Right? What is karma? It's Jati Ayu Bhoga, Drishta Drishta Janma Vedaniya. It comes in this birth or the next birth. And what is it? Jati, the birth you take. Ayo, how long you live in it? So he's waiting. How long am I going to have to live in it? What's my ayo? How much karma needs to be burnt up in this particular form? What do? You wait. Can't do anything about it. And you keep your mind fixed if you're a yogi on Bhagavan. So he counting the days until his deliverance from the karma that had caused the state of being a deer. When the time came, he gave up the deer body, which was wet from bathing in the waters of the holy place. So even as a deer, he to burn up the karma faster, he took bath in the sacred river, because that burns up karma. He hung out with the sages, so he could hear, kirtan, maybe. I'm making this up, but let's suppose. And that way, the sacred, clearly the sages would have been discussing scripture and so forth. And so all of that entered into his dear mind. Remember, he had kind of human consciousness, so he could rapidly burn up the karma. Now, third birth. Okay, so it was Bharat the king, deer. Now, there was a certain Brahmana. Krishna says in the Gita, if you don't finish up in one life, at the end of chapter 6, you take birth in either a Srimati, a pious family, or yoginam, sadurlabham, or in a yogi family, which is very rare to take birth in a yogi family. Because why? Because yogis are practicing brahmachari. How about that little technical point there? So it's it's sort of unlikely that yogis are going to have families, isn't it? But they might, for the sake of delivering, they would have a different way of thinking about it. They wouldn't be sort of having kids because they think it's going to make them happy. They would be contemplating bringing an Atman into their to be gurus of the Atman, something like that. They would have a different way of thinking about it. But so Krishna says either a yogi family, very rare, or a pious, prosperous family, which is the case with Bharata. So there's certain brahmanas. So in this text, the brahmanas are usually pious brahmanas, but they're not all. Even in the Upanishads, is that there was a distinction made between birthright brahmanas and genuine brahmanas who know Brahman. Already in the Upanishads, we see that distinction being made in the story of Satyakama and his father, who said, in our family, oh Satyakama, we're not the kind of brahmanas that are brahmanas by birth. Oh no, we actually, we study the Veda and we're real Brahmins. Anyway, so here he is, Brahmana lineage. And he was endowed with the qualities of peacefulness, self-control, austerity, study, and recitation. All of these are the real qualities of a Brahmin. Peaceful, tapas, self-control, right, discipline, austerity, vairagya, study and recitation of Vedic texts, renunciation, contentment, tolerance, humility, wisdom. And the text is making a point here, listing this out, so we know what a real Brahmin is supposed to be. Not not someone just sort of demanding respect by dint of birth. Wisdom, non-enviousness, knowledge of the self, right? So Brahman, obviously the word Brahmana is connected to the word Brahman. Why do you think they're called Brahmanas? Well, they're supposed to know Brahman. So sa Brahman veti, ya Brahman veti, sa Brahmanaha. I don't know where that comes from. I read it in the commentary of Madhvacharya. But he doesn't, in the old days, they didn't give references like we do. Right? If you refer to something nowadays, you have to give the reference. But that wasn't the so that someone can check it up, right? But back then, the assumption was if you're writing Shastra, you're honest. You don't need to give a reference. So I don't know where it comes from. I could never trace it down. Well, I haven't really tried. But Yah Brahmanam Veti Sa Brahmanaha. The one who knows Brahman, Yah Brahmanam Veti, the one who knows Brahman, Sa, that one, Brahmanaha, is a Brahmana. So here are the qualities. Okay, he's clearly not following brahmacharya. You've got 9 sons. Forgive us, ladies. There's an old text here. Let's edit this. He begot 9 children from his elder wife, all with his same qualities of learning, character, behavior, handsomeness, and magnanimity. And in his younger wife, twins were born. One of these was a male. Okay, so at least there's one girl in there. The other one must have been a female. So one of the younger wife twins, one of them was a male. They say he was Bharata, best of the sage kings, right? So now he's been reborn in this sort of pious family. The exalted devotee of the Lord, who had given up the body of a deer and taken birth in a Brahmana family as his final birth. This is going to be his final. He's not going to make the same mistake. And he remembers the two lives. In that birth, too, he was very fearful of attachments to his kinsmen. So he fixed his mind on the lotus feet of the Lord, who destroys the bonds of karma. Fixing our minds on Bhagavan, which is so pleasant and easy to do, burns karma, my friends. Jnana burns karma. There's lots of ways of burning karma. And the most powerful ways of jnana, not, fixing the mind on the Atman, but more powerful still is fixing the mind of Bhagavan. All the time, all the time, all the time. I am just going to throw a log on the fire. So if you need a bathroom break, I'll be back in 2 minutes. Get some more fluid as well. Okay. So let's get back to our story. I hope you're enjoying it. It's such a fun story. One of my favorites. So by the grace of the Lord, verse 3 here, he remembered the series of his previous births. If you have the blue book, it's page 358 of the Blue Bhakti Yoga book. By the grace of the Lord, he remembered the series of his previous births, and so always concerned about obstacles to the realization of the Atman, he presented himself to the world as mad, stupid, blind, and deaf. He purposely behaved as, I don't know if retarded is a politically correct term anymore, but as mad, stupid, blind, and deaf. Presented himself as a madman, as just incapable of communicating. He didn't want any attachments. He wanted to keep people away. After his son had received the sacred thread of the twice born, it's a Brahmana family, right? So the twice born, you're born when you receive the sacred thread. It's one of the 12 rites of passage. You see the sacred thread. Okay. So the Brahmana, his mind, the father, his mind bound by love for his son, performed the sacred rites of passage for him, right? According to Brahmana rituals, culminating in the rites celebrating the completion of Vedic studies. So there's these various 12 rites. And here are 2 of them: sacred thread ceremony, and well, that's one of them, upon the completion of Vedic studies. This was in accordance with custom, which means dharma. After all, the training of the son is to be undertaken by the father, right, according to dharma rules. He also arranged for his son to be taught the rules pertaining to cleanliness and mouthwashing, and the rules of correct behavior, right? Left hand, don't use your left hand for eating, all of that. And the rules of correct behavior, even though the son did not accept them, because the son was pretending to be, is retarded. Can I say retarded? Is that politically incorrect these days? I'm not sure. What would be a kind way of referring to someone who, cognitively challenged? Something.
Intellectual disability.
Thank you. So he pretended to have intellectual disabilities. Thank you very much. Bharata, even in the very presence of his father, did not learn all this correctly on purpose. Of course, he's brilliant. But he, on purpose, he didn't. The father wanted to teach him the Gayatri mantra, right? Beginning with Om. So Om Bhur Bhuva Sva Tat Savito Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yana, right? And the words containing Bhur Bhuva Svaha, right? Om Bhur Bhuva Svaha. So he tries to teach him this. But even over a period spanning the spring and summer months, he could only make Bharata grasp it incorrectly because he didn't want to learn. He didn't want to get attached. In this way, the father's mind was absorbed in affection for his son, whom he considered to be his very self. And he clung to the illusory notion, right? Because he's pious and genuine Brahmin, but he's not a yogi, so he's not pursuing the Atman. He's absorbed in the world of Dharma. It doesn't sound like he's doing karma yoga, so he's a pious Brahmin and making good karma, but he's not a yogi. So therefore, he clung to the illusory notion that Bharata had to be educated. If he was a yogi, he would know, well, really, my son is an Atman, so what I really should be teaching him is about the Atman, because what's going to be the most useful for my son at the moment of death? What's going to be of ultimate use? After all, we've had infinite lives. So then finally we get the human life. Do we want to put an end to it all? From a yogic point of view, if you understand Atman and Bhakti, you should be teaching your kids that. So, but he had this illusory notion that the only thing he had to do was give him a material education according to the dharmas of brahmanas. So he taught his son all the duties of the graduate Vedic student, a brahmana dharma, right? Brahmacharya, etc., cleanliness, right? Shocham, study, svadhyaya, the taking of vows, right? But not yogic vows. And the study would be Vedic study, not yogic study. It would be hymns and ritual, which Vedas do you chant to perform which sacrifice. So it would be the 3 Vedas and so forth. Regulatory principles and service to the guru and sacred fire. Notice these are all kind of mundane dharmas for the Brahmana, mundane from a yogic point of view. But his hopes remained unrealized in all that time, as Bharata did not apply himself to them on purpose. Then the Brahmana himself, forgetful of his own Atman self, right? He's doing all this, just like Bharata got attached to the form. This Brahman is attached to his son Bharata. Due to his attachment to his household, was taken away from his home by time, which is never forgetful. We can forget about time, but time won't forget, right? So what happens to him? He was a pious Brahmana. He didn't get liberated, but he would have taken a nice pious birth. It probably is another Brahmana in the next life, right? So he was, but he didn't follow the path of yoga. He followed the path of Dharma, not the karma yoga path of Dharma, just the path of Dharma. Thereupon, we don't want to read this. This is Sati. Well, let's read it. The chaste younger wife, entrusting the twins to her co-wife, herself went to the realm of her husband by following him. So this sounds ghastly to us, but what can I tell you? The idea is that voluntarily, and it's only meant for the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas, not for the other castes, voluntarily, if the wife is attached to the husband and the husband dies, the wife can enter the funeral pyre and embrace her husband. And the idea is wherever the husband goes, that's where she'll go. But we have no way of disproving that that's possible or not possible or true or false. What we do know is, like so many other things, the practice got perverted. And certainly by the colonial period, it became perverse. And widows were thrown into the fire involuntarily because the family didn't want to support them. So the British, obviously the British thought this was the most ghastly practice. And Raja Ram Mohan Roy, who's sometimes called the father of modern India, so he would have been late 17th century, turn of the 18th century. He actually went to England and petitioned Parliament to outlaw the practice. So, and made very powerful. He witnessed it. He witnessed his own, I think it was sister-in-law, but immediate family member being thrown into the flames. So it happened very rarely, and it was voluntary in the pre-modern period. It's hard to know how often it was practiced. It seems to have been practiced more by the warrior caste, the Rajputs, the Rajasthan, and there's references to that occurring there. What can I tell you? It's something that you know, it's too, even if it might, let's allow that, because we don't know. No one here can say this is false. Let's allow that a genuine wife wants to follow her husband. So it's a kind of assisted, I don't know, it's suicide basically, but not suicide in the sense of I'm depressed, I want to end it all. No, I want to go where my husband goes. So let's allow that as a possibility. And she enters the flames and follows her husband. Let's say that could happen, right, to some celestial realm. The fact that it can be so massively subject to abuse clearly means that it should be outlawed, and that's the position that Raja Ram Mohan Roy took and the British took, and I believe it's outlawed today, but you still see that. It's kind of like it's almost like associated with like a right-wing resurgence of Hinduism, where, you know, it's kind of glorified, and, you know, it's very dangerous, because then you put pressure on a young widow. Oh, you know, I don't know. Clearly, it's something that should be. I'm not sure if it's outlawed in all cases at all times. Maybe someone can go online and check that. Is sati absolutely outlawed? 100%. Happy Jack, stick that in wiki and see what comes up, if you don't mind. Is sati 100% outlawed in India? Because it still happens, and it's huge, and nobody tries to stop it, and the police, they just stand around and watch it. So it does still happen. But what is the legal status of sati nowadays? All right, we'll get back to you. So anyway, but here it is. And of course, Sati being the wife of Shiva, who, you know, she makes it famous by when her father offends Shiva, she doesn't want to remain in the body that was begotten by her father, because her father Daksha had offended Shiva, and she wants to renounce the body. So she enters the flame. It's not that she's not following Shiva anyway. She just enters the flames to give up that body, because she wants no connection with her father, who had insulted her beloved Shiva. And then she comes back as Parvati, actually, the daughter of the Himalayas, but then she has to win Shiva all over again. So that's where the story originates. Happy Jack, anything on the legal status of sati today?
I can't see specific for today, but I definitely see that it's banned. Everywhere I see it's banned.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you know, you can't really stop it. You know, if you go to a rural part of Rajasthan and the local police, and they're not going to stop it, because they're, you know, you have thousands of people that are glorifying it, and it's a huge event. The police are just helpless. So it still does take place. Okay, so after the father passed away, the other brothers desisted from the obligations of instructing their brother Bharata, thinking him to be dull-witted. That's a nice word. Well, I don't know. Is it a nice word? Maybe not. What was it? Intellectually challenged. Intellectually challenged, yeah. Their sphere of understanding was limited. So the brothers, who were also pious, we were told at the beginning, but they don't want to be associated with this dull wit, as the text calls him. Their sphere of understanding was limited to the ritualistic knowledge of the three Vedas. So they were trapped in this ritualistic aspect of Vedic culture, not the higher knowledge of the self. So that's the Vedas in contrast to the Upanishads. The Upanishads see themselves as the Vedanta, the anta of the Veda, the culmination of the Veda, and they don't reject the Vedas, but they look down on it as materialistic and ritualistic. So they say that's for worldly people. It's fine. Do Vedic rituals, you become purified, you become pious. Okay, that's fine, but it's lower. That's how Vedanta positions itself. But we are the Veda anta, and that would be the Upanishads. And so they were ignorant of Bharata's greatness. They didn't know he was a Jivan Mukta. When vulgar, beastly people called him names such as mad, dull-wit, deaf, or dumb, Bharata responded with behavior in accordance with their expectations. When he was made to work by the will of others, he worked, because he's big-bodied. He ate whatever food came his way. He's a Jivan Mukta. He's a Paramahamsa, completely enlightened soul. Whatever food came his way, whether by forced labor, wages, begging, fate, irrespective of whether it was a large or small amount, tasty or spoiled, And he never did so motivated by the gratification of the senses. Whatever he ate was simply to maintain his body. This is vairagya, my friends. This is what we have to inch towards. At least we have to know where we're supposed to head. Then we can decide if we want to head there or not. But this is vairagya. You only eat to maintain the body, not out of any sense of gratifying the senses. Bhakti is a little bit of a escape valve, because then you make nice things for your Bhagavan, but even then you got to make sure you're making nice things for your Bhagavan, not, oh, I'm going to offer it and then I'm going to eat it, and I'm really making it for me, but I'll offer it. You be very careful. The mind is tricky. But this is vairagya. So he never, I'll read it again. He never did so, right? Eating, motivated by the gratification of the senses. He had gained mastery over his own Atman, which is blissfully experienced, pure, perfect in its own right. This is the Svarupa Vastana Patanjali. And untouched by cause and effect, karma. The Atman is pure. It's not subject to any laws or conditions. It's only the body and mind that are the reservoir and receptors of karma. He never identified himself as being the body in its experiences of happiness and distress. This is classic, just 101 Bhagavad Gita, Sukha Dukkha, which are caused by the dualities. I like this, I don't like that. Raga Dvesha, Raga Dvesha, Raga Dvesha. And that Raga Dvesha, you get your Raga, your Sukha, experience Dvesha, your Dukkha, Sukha Dukkha, Sukha Dukkha, Sukha Dukkha. That's embodied life. Bharata wandered about with only his buttocks covered with a loincloth, right? This is the sage with a loincloth. They call it kopin in Sanskrit. Without covering his body in heat or cold, wind or rain. He's beyond the dualities. He was built like a bull, solid in limb and muscular. His Brahman effulgence, like a precious gem, was covered over by dirt from lying down on the ground and from not washing or massaging. His effulgence, like Shukra when he wanders into the assembly of Parikshit, although Bharata even more so because he actually went out of his way to appear intellectually challenged, if I remember the phrase right. With his sacred Brahmin thread, black from grime, I'm surprised he's still wearing it, he was considered fallen, a brashta, and the name is brashta, a Brahmin in name only, by those who did not know who he really was. When he was put to work, even by his own brothers in field labor, he did it, but he was not aware of whether the ground he was given to clear was even or uneven, excessive or inadequate. He just basically was burning up his karma, just like he did with the body of a deer. When he sought food from others as wages for such work, he would eat a single grain, if that's all that was given, or an oil cake, or a husk or rotten grain, or even the sediment left in the pot after cooking, and other such things, as if they were nectar. All right, now we move into another story. There's beautiful philosophical teachings when I hope we get a chance to just glimpse at them. Let's keep going, all right? So as it happened, one day, the leader of a band of thugs, okay, now thug is not an English word. It was brought into the English language in the colonial period, but there were people called thuggies, and they were Kali, they were, tamasic form of Kali, Bhadra Kali worshippers, and they would offer human sacrifice. And so they would join groups of pilgrims going on pilgrimage, and they would get the stragglers, just like I guess animals do, right? When there's a flock of animals, predators will pick off the weak. So they would capture these stragglers and then take them and offer them. And they were called thuggies. And so the word then enters the English language as thug. It's actually, you won't find that word before the colonial period because it's a Hindi word, like jungle. Jungle is a Hindi word. And, juggernaut is a Hindi word. And other words like punch and chai, tea is a Hindi word coming from chai, right? Chai, tea. And punch, you give someone a punch is, 5 in Hindi, punch. So you give someone a 5. And like that. So these are words that enter the English language, just like lots of English words enter the Hindi language. So, and now with yoga, of course, so many more words are coming in, and with Indian restaurants and that bringing in a whole type of gastronomic vocabulary. So the language change is two ways. So the leader of a band of thugs, desiring a son, was about to offer a man, a sacrificial beast, to the goddess Bhadrakali. tamasic form. She accepts blood sacrifice. Normally just goats and stuff, but he wants to really up the, he really wants to just, normally there's very little references to human sacrifice in any literature. This is one of the few, I don't know any, frankly, I don't know any other story. It's probably, it's probably a couple more here and there, but it's not that this is stipulated in Bhadrakali worship, but she does accept blood sacrifice, meaning goats and so forth. Usually it's a goat or a buffalo or something, but he's breaking the dharma of, and he's thinking that, oh, if I offer a man, that's going to be, then my chances of getting my wish fulfilled are going to be greater. So don't think this is normative for Kali worship, but Kali does, there are some forms that accept blood, and Kali is one of them. No forms of Vishnu. After the sacrificial beast by chance escapes, all right, so he had another human that he was going to offer, but that other human ran away. So the chief's followers were pursuing him, but unable to find their quarry. So he sends his men out to find the escaped sacrifice, but they couldn't, but they bump into Bharata. So that's how it goes. So it being midnight and covered in darkness, they espied Bharata by the unexpected hand of fate. That descendant of the distinguished Angira lineage was standing guard, protecting the fields from deer and boar. So his brothers were abusing him because he's big, but they think he's a dullwit. So they make him stand there like and don't even pay him or anything, just feed him rotten old food. So although in the beginning it said they had all those good qualities, it seems they've lost them at this point in the story. So after evaluating Bharata's perfect physical qualities, the thugs bound him with ropes, thinking he would accomplish their master's task, right? Well, they lost the original one, but this one's good enough, good replacement. And they joyfully brought him back to Kali, Chandika's temple, their faces beaming with joy. The thugs then fed him, anointed him in accordance with their rites, right? These black kind of tamasic, Kali, Bhadrakali related, whatever their rites are, right? They have the pujas and certain things that are offered, like wine and stuff, which of course, different forms accept different kinds of offerings. And there's a form for everybody, even for like bloodthirsty people. And the idea being, if you worship the form properly, which they're not doing, then you become purified. And then slowly you then move on to higher level forms that as your consciousness changes, then you cease becoming attracted to blood sacrifice, and then you realize how gruesome and awful that is, and karmically how you're getting yourself into trouble because the karma comes back to you. And then the idea is you progress into more sattvic forms of Ishvara. But Ishvara, being kind, does manifest these tamasic forms according to the Bhagavatam anyway. Bhadrakali, I know there's probably Bhadrakali traditions that would have a different story to tell about Bhadrakali, and that's appropriate, but the Bhagavatam sees that as tamasic. So the thugs then fed him, anointed him in accordance with their rites, dressed him in fresh cloth, made him ready with ornaments, ointments, garlands, sacred clay, and so forth, right? They're getting him ready. Then they brought the human sacrificial animal before God, dressed Bhadrakali, to the accompaniment of the cymbals, drums. So they're doing their kind of Bhadrakali style kirtan, songs, along with offerings of incense, light. So this is all puja, but there would be certain things that would be specific to Bhadrakali that wouldn't be offerable to other forms, like wine, for example. Parched grass, shoots, sprouts, and fruit, in accordance with the prescriptions for grand sacrificial slaughter. So there are dharmas, there are rituals that entail what a blood sacrifice, like a goat or a buffalo, should consist of. Then the leader of the thugs, about to propitiate goddess Bhadrakali with the sacrifice of blood wine from the human beast, took up a terrible sword, which had been sharpened and consecrated for the occasion. So this is part of their rites. They have a sword. And again, normally it should have been used for a goat. You decapitate the goat in front of the goddess. And I don't know what the rites are. There'd be some kind of, I don't know, if they collect the blood. I mean, I don't know. But there would be texts that would be appropriate to that type of bhakti, actually. Tamasic bhakti, but bhakti, tamasic, why? Because it's a cause of violence and harm. But it's bhakti to a form of Ishvari. So, here, as is evident, right, should be obvious, the nature of these thugs was rajasic and tamasic. Tamasic, destruction; rajasic, they had all these desires. Their minds had become proud from the passion of possessing wealth. They delighted in violence and had willfully taken the adharma path. Even for Bhadrakali worship, even for the tamasic worship and offering of goat, there's a dharma and an adharma connected with that. There's a dharmic way of getting a goat and offering it and killing it. There's an appropriate way to do that, which would be the dharma of that. It may be tamasic, it might be karma creating, but there's a dharmic way of doing it, but not human is an adharmic way of doing it. So they had taken the unrighteous path. They were contemptuous towards the foremost Brahmana caste to a rays of God. That's the real Brahmins are supposed to be rays of God. If they know Brahman, then they know their Atman, and the Atman is a ray of God. So that's fair enough, as long as the Brahmana does know Brahman. It's when it becomes a caste by birth and you don't pursue Brahman, then it all goes wrong, the caste system. So nowadays, the whole thing should be thrown out. But the text likes to think that before the age of Kali, the caste system, actually people were more, actually following the dharmas of their castes. Anyway, that's not something we need to get into. As far as I'm concerned, the whole thing should be dismantled in this day, in our day and age. So the goddess Bhadrakali, now remember, she's in the deity. What did I say before? The divinity can enter the deity. So here's the story right here. So she's in the deity. She saw this extremely cruel act against Bharata, who was self-realized, without enemies, a well-wisher to all beings, and the direct descendant of a Brahmana sage, right? One of the 10 Brahmana families, the Angira lineage. Such an act had no sanction or support in sacred scripture. Goat, maybe, not a human. For Bhadrakali only, but remember. Just at the last moment, she suddenly burst forth from the deity in a scorching form, intolerable to bear due to its Brahman potency. She burst forth as if desiring to destroy the world. This is Kali. Even Vishnu and Shiva in the stories of the Devi Mahatmya. If you're into this, read the Devi Mahatmya. That's the primary shastra for Kali, but the Sattvic Kali. Read the Devi Mahatmya. It has 3 stories, and even when she's like this, even Shiva can't control her. In fact, in one story, she almost decapitates him without realizing who he is, and he's lying at her feet. This is Devi. This is girl power, my friends. You want girl power? Kali's your girl. Not Bhadrakali. That's really she's being very kind. Kali is very kindly becomes Bhadrakali, even for the really low, really tamasic sort of individuals. But you've got to make sure you don't do anything wrong, right? Because you have to follow the dharma of that. Because look what happens now. She bursts forth. Terrifying face, swollen red eyes, eyebrows like curved arches, quivering with the force of the intense rage and intolerance that possessed her, right? Because this great Paramahamsa is going to be offered. She doesn't want that. After all, she is Kali, she's Durga, she has her sattvic origins, and she's just taking these forms just to help, just so that everybody gets a chance to connect to some form. So then with the very same sacrificial sword, she severed the heads of those sinful evildoers, furiously emitting a resounding laugh. She drank the hot blood wine pouring out of the thug's neck with her companion. She said, all right, you want to offer me blood? Okay, I'll take yours. And this is the form of Kali. Staggering with the intoxication of excessive drinking, she sang raucously with her associates. So there are the 9 matrikas, as the 9. I don't know much about them. It's not really a tradition I'm very interested in, but she has her 9 associates, and there they are. They danced and sported playfully with their heads as balls. This is Kali showing us, showing us what death and so forth. For of course Kali, for a devotee, she's Ma. All of this horrific side of her is just to teach us. What death is, and that, she wears a garland of skulls to teach us, to remind us. So her devotees don't see her; they see her as a loving mother. But there's a kind of bhakti that a bhakta of Kali would unpack that much better than I can. That for me, it's not a form that I respect it, and I think it's pretty cool, and I have some understanding of it theologically. I don't reject it or anything. It's just not my I'm a Krishna bhakta. And But Krishna had, think of the 11th chapter of the Gita, the horrific form in the Bhagavad Gita itself. Krishna, there's this the form where all of the warriors in the army are being gnashed to pieces in the teeth of the form. So even Krishna has that, can manifest that out of his being. The Sukha Durga, it was Radha and Lakshmi in other sides of her being. So just as Krishna does it too, he manifests this horrific battlefield form, just to sort of remind us of the ghastliness of death. I mean, death is everywhere. Think how ghastly it is being, think of what's going on in the underfoliage of your lawn, insects getting ripped apart. It's ghastly. So this is the ghastly form of Kali, right? In this way, the offense of directing black rites against great souls completely rebounds back on the performer. So they transgressed the appropriate Kali related rituals, which might have involved a goat, perhaps. O King Parikshit, devotee of Vishnu, it is not in actual fact so amazing that Bharata remained unperturbed, even when his head was about to be severed. He had no fear. He didn't care. He said, great, finally, my karma comes to an end. How can any fear exist for the supreme devotees of Hari? They're called the Paramahamsa, great swans. Why great swan? Because a swan is supposed to be able to take, I don't know if it's true or not, but the law is a swan can separate milk mixed with water, can separate the milk out, suck out the milk and leave the water. Now, in the same way that Paramahansa can live in the world and live in a place of Brahman and sort of suck out Brahman from something like that. So how can any fear exist for the Paramahamsa? We're freed from the extremely tight knot in the heart. What's the tight knot in the heart? Avidya, asmita, raga. What is it? Caused by misidentifying the true Atman self with the body. That's classic Patanjali asmita. Drig darshana shaktayor ekatmata eva asmita. To think the seer and the instruments are cited the same, right? Here is another way of saying the same thing. The tight knot in the heart, it's a knot, right? We're bound to this identity. Caused by what? By misidentifying the true Atman self with the body. You could say that's avidya or asmita. Either one would fit that. They are the well-wishers of living beings without enmity. They've taken refuge at the Lord's lotus feet. So they're protected in all such situations by Bhagavan himself in the form of his ever-vigilant weapon of time. Now, here's a great story, and I really want to move on. So now he wanders around now. He leaves that place, and this is a cool story. And it's very philosophical. We're not going to get much chance to read. We've only got 20 minutes, but let's see what we can do. So one day, Rahugana, the ruler of the Sindhu and Sovira kingdoms, was traveling along the banks of the Ikshumati River to the ashram of Kapila. Right, Kapila from last week, my friends. Here he is. The ashram of Kapila. I mean, presumably the ashram where Kapila had lived. Oh no, actually, he thinks Kapila is still there. Oh, let's see where this goes. So Bharata, best of the Brahmanas, was spotted by chance by the chief of the king's palanquin bearers. It's kind of like press ganging in England, when you press gang people onto the boats. Get them drunk in the pubs at night, and then you walk them onto the boat. And next morning, they woke up with a hangover, and you're at sea. And then they force them to, work. That's called press ganging. So it looks like he got press ganged into being a sacrifice for Bhadrakali. Now he's being press ganged to carry the palanquin. He was spotted by the king's palanquin bearers, who happened to be seeking a bear at that time. Considering Bharat to be stout, young, of solid limbs, and capable of carrying a burden like a cow or an ass, he brought him back. Bharat just went along. So Bharat was seized like the other bearers who had been pressed into forced labor before him, even though he didn't deserve such treatment. But that great soul just carried the palanquin. And there's great instructions to the king, and the king becomes, realizes what a kind of a harsh king he's been, and he becomes a great bhakta. So it has a nice ending. But here's where there's a lot of jnana in this, and we'll see how much we can get through. Bharata was looking, okay, how about ahimsa? You want ahimsa? Do you remember the Jains who sweep the path ahead of them so as not to tread on any ants? You've seen pictures of them on we've seen them on documentaries and stuff. Two schools of Jain, the Shvetambaras. They wear white cloth and they brush the street ahead of them so that they don't tread on. How are we all doing up there? So they don't tread on any ants. Are we all doing good? Yeah, everybody hanging in there. So cool. All right. I'm sorry we don't get to sort of like be personally, see each other personally, but that's how it is. All right. So let's get back to our story. Right. So Bharata was looking carefully ahead for the distance of an arrow, right? In other words, whatever that is, you shoot an arrow 10 feet, 10 yards, right? So he's looking ahead so as to avoid stepping on any insects. This is ahimsa, just like the Jains. When his stride was no longer in step with that of the other men, right? Because he's avoiding the ants, so he's swaying from left to right. Rahugana noticed that the palanquin's motion was uneven. The king in the palanquin, he noticed, he yelled to the men carrying the palanquin, "Hey, bearers, what's this? Walk properly, carry the vehicle evenly." Arrogant king. At this, hearing the chastising words of their master, the bearer's mind became fearful of punishment. So they informed the king as follows: "It's not us who are being careless, O Lord of men. We're carrying the palanquin properly in accordance with your instruction. It is this person here," right, Bharat, "who is not walking quickly. Although he was just employed fresh today, we're not able to carry the palanquin evenly with him because he doesn't want to step on ants." After hearing the words of the poor fellows, Rahugana realized that the irregular motion of one person linked with others, I remember this, it took me forever to translate it from Sanskrit. It was so complex, this particular sentence. I'm just having a flashback. Rahugana realized that the irregular motion of one person linked with others obviously creates irregularity with all those who are connected with him. That was a really hard, so I knew what it meant, but the Sanskrit, it's so hard making the grammar work. That's what I came up with, right? So if four people are carrying a palanquin, then one person is pulling it, all four of them get pulled to one side. So he realizes this. Although he had served his elders and so should have known better, right? He should have known Dharma. His anger was somewhat aroused by the force of his kingly nature. Rajas, the king, Raja, a king Raja is obviously Rajasic because you have to rule a kingdom. But his Rajas should be controlled by Sattva. So the ideal kingdom and the ideal ideology of Vedic Varnashram is the kings have to be Rajasic, but they need to be controlled by Sattvic Brahmanas. Otherwise, their Rajas can easily morph into Tamas. The Gita says when Rajas is not fulfilled, it becomes Tamas. So Rajas easily morphs into Tamas. And the ideal Varna Ashram ideology, right? The kings are Rajasic because they have to be, but they have to be monitored by the Brahmins, who are supposed to be renounced in all the things we just read at the beginning of that chapter of Bharat's father. So they have to be detached, right? So they're not exploiting their relationship with the king. They have to be austere. They have to be penniless. Whatever we said, there's verses that say whatever they receive in the day, they have to distribute it all by night. So there are severe conditions placed on the Brahmanas. Obviously, that's the ideology. So the king, but the king has to be Rajasic. It just has to be monitored by Sattva, which is supposed to be come by the Brahmanas who are, as we read at the beginning of the last story. Let's just quickly revisit it because this comes up, caste system and all of that. Let's have a quick look at the father. The text is taking a moment to tell us. He's using the father as an exemplar. It's taking a moment to tell us what a real Brahmana is. He was endowed with the qualities of peacefulness, self-control, austerity, study and recitation of Vedic texts. Now, this is the old Vedas, right? Not the Upanishads. Fair enough, but doesn't matter. Renunciation, contentment, right? So they're supposed to be poverty-stricken. Tolerance, humility, wisdom, non-enviousness, knowledge of the self, and joyfulness. So if you really have those qualities, then you can actually, so you don't want anything, you're not intimidated, you're not afraid, you can actually guide a king in the ideology. God, there's a big difference between ideology and reality, just as there is for our democracy and, as we found out. But that's the ideology. So let's go back. So, so he realized, okay, although he had served his elders and so should have known better, his anger was aroused. His mind overcome by Rajas, he sarcastically addressed Bharat, whose Brahman potency was concealed like a fire covered by ashes. Now he's being sarcastic. Hey, brother, this is obviously a major inconvenience for you. The path is long and you've been carrying the load all alone for a long time. He hasn't. He's just joined in. He's not all alone. There's four of them. So he's being sarcastic. As these other co-workers are not behaving as friends, You're not very stout, he is, nor are your limbs solid, they are, and you're assailed by old age. He's young, so he's being really kind of nasty. Although he was sarcastically insulted in this way, Bharat continued carrying the palanquin silently as before. He had never projected the false notion of I and mine on this worthless body. Aham mama, right? He had no asmita, that I am this body, and these things belong to me, which was to be his last. The body is, after all, just a residence created because of ignorance of the true Atman self. What is the body? It's a product of karma. What does Patanjali say? Right? Avidya, kshetra mutaresham. Ignorance is the field of all the kleshas. So what does he say here? It's just a residence created because of ignorance, right? Because of the kleshas we act, we make karma, right? Karma shaya, drishta janma vedaniya. Make karma, and that becomes, and what does that become? Jati ayuboga. So it's just the residence, temporary residence. It is made specific to each embodied being. You have your body, I have mine. It's all specific by the gunas, sattva, tamas, out of material substances like the elements and qualities, and you know your sankhya, the sankhya elements, in accordance with samskaras and karma. Your samskaras make karma, and karma then gets lodged as samskara. So there's a cycle. Samsaras arise in the mind in the form of desires. Desires underpin action. Action then generates reaction, and that reaction gets lodged as a samskara. So that's these two are inseparably interconnected. So when after some time, when the movement of the palanquin again became disrupted, Rahugana, furious, exclaimed, "Hey, what's going on? You've disobeyed my order. By disregarding me, you're as good as dead. I will teach you a lesson so you will regain your senses, you deranged fool." Just as Yama, having a bit of a kingly moment here. Just as Yama, the god of death, with rod in hand, inflicts on the people in general. He's comparing himself to Yama, like the Pluto of the Latin tradition, Yama. Although the king spoke in this uncontrolled way, he considered himself to be learned, because after he's going on a pilgrimage to see Kapila, but he's able to listen. I hope we get there. He's arrogant, he's overwhelmed by pride and tamas, but he has a spark of piety there. Otherwise, he would never have come into contact with Bharata anyway, in the first place. You come into contact with a great being like that. That's an amazing act of grace, even though it's kind of an inauspicious start. The fact that he's met this great being means that he has, and I think it may even say that later on. But right now, he's overwhelmed by Rajas and Tamas. Thinking himself Lord of men due to arrogance born of Rajas and Tamas, he had in the past rebuked all those who were devotees of Bhagavan. He'd been, insolent to great beings. Bharata was a supremely powerful Brahmana, right? Now we know what a real Brahmana is, the one who knows Brahman. He had realized his Brahman nature, so that's why that we can actually call him a real Brahmana, as Atman, and was the dear friend of all beings. He's not afraid of the king. Half smiling, he spoke to the king, who was not very familiar with the behavior of perfected yogis. The Brahmana, that's Bharat, said, "What you have said is not sarcastic, but in fact it would be true, O hero, if in fact there were in reality a burden borne by me, a bearer." Now he's deconstructing everything that's not Atman. If there really were a burden borne by me, a bearer, and if there were indeed a path to be walked upon by me, a walker, but in reality I'm an Atman, I have nothing to do with such things. The wise do not talk about such qualities as stout pertaining to the body. Now he's not insulting the king, but he's showing him to be a fool. Stoutness, thinness, disease, anxiety, hunger, thirst, fear, quarrel. And I'm skipping some verses here. So the Brahma, he deconstructs each of the king's words here. All of these all apply to the one who is born with a body. They do not apply to me, the Atman. So we've actually, this sort of sounds a lot like Advaita teaching. There's some beautiful teachings in Advaita that say this kind of thing, that I am not this, I'm not stoutness. So this is neti, not eti, none of these things. Let's skip. With regard to your comment about being as good as dead, you're correct. It is in fact seen that all created beings have a beginning and an end. And if the relationship between master and servant were forever fixed, O honorable king, then it would be indeed appropriate to speak of obeying an order, but these are temporary roles. I'm your servant now, maybe next life, you'll be the servant. We do not find the slightest grounds for any notion of real difference between king and servant. Right? There are Atmans, other than what is assigned by social convention. This one is a king, that's a servant. Therefore, who is really a ruler? And what is really servitude? Nevertheless, despite all this, O king, tell us, what can we do for you? Very polite. What would be the benefit of your remedy for me, O hero? If in fact I have attained my true Atman self, you're going to punish me? What good would that do if I've actually attained my Atman self? But I'm only acting like a mad, deranged fool. What would you do then if I'm just putting this on as a show? And if, on the other hand, I actually really am a mad dullard, then your remedy will be grinding the already ground. What's the point? If I'm really a dull wit, then you beating me up's not going to change that. So you'll be grinding the ground. It's already been ground. I'm already a dull wit. What are you going to, how are you going to make me, how can I get worse than that? So either I'm enlightened being or I'm a dull wit. Either way, your so-called remedy of punishing me is going to be useless. In this manner, Bharata, the best of the sages, responded. Can we just go on to the end of this chapter, my friends? We're on 14. Let's go to 25, okay? And then the teachings continue for several chapters, and you can download them and read them yourself. But let's read another, just 10 more verses. And we've got 7 minutes. We'll spill over, and then we'll take questions. I love these. I love this Jnana Yoga portion coming up. In this manner, Bharat, the best of the sages, right? He'd been a king meditating on the side of the river, then the deer. Then he became a son of a Brahmana. Then he was offered a talking about life experience, multi-life, tri-life experience. Then he'd been offered to Kali, and now he's in this situation. Then he was a scarecrow in the field, scaring off the wild animals. So now he's acting as the teacher of the king, the guru of the king, and the king's able to hear actually. So to his credit, he had enough. He'd done enough. He had, even though it says he defended Bhagavatas. Bhagavatas are the followers of the Bhagavata. The Bhagavatas. He defended them. It must have had some merit there that he allowed him to meet his guru. And actually, you could meet your guru, but not recognize, not hear, not listen out of arrogance. He was able to listen. So Bharat, the best of sages, responded by redirecting the king's statements back to him. His demeanor was calm, as ignorance, the root cause of forgetfulness of the Atman, had ceased to affect him. Thereafter, he continued carrying the king's vehicle as before, wishing to finish up his stock of activated karma by accepting this task as its fruit. Let me burn up my karma. I carry this heavy palanquin, and hopefully I'll burn it up, so this will be my last life. The king, Pandu, he's a Pandu king. He's a Pandava, Arjuna, the Pandus. He's coming in the line of Arjuna, so there's a very noble lineage there. The Pandu king, lord of the Sindhu, right? Sindhu is in northwest. It's now in Pakistan. The Sindhu region. It's it's west of Punjab. And the Sauvira kingdoms. He heard the words of the Brahmana. They were in accordance with all the sacred texts on yoga, the words of Bharat. And if you really are transmitting those and following those, then they have the potency to cut through the knot in the heart. To the extent that the teacher is following and transmitting honestly, no ego, not trying to appropriate them to make money or to get fame, to the extent that the teacher, this is our responsibility, my friends, consider. You can't touch the heart of the student unless you're two things. One, you're transmitting with no ego, no personal motive. Two, you're following. If you're under those two conditions, you can touch the heart of the student, and which means inspire the student to take up the spiritual path seriously. If you don't have those two conditions, you're not following, or you're trying to use the teachings for name, fame, or glory, what to speak of, make money. Same words, but they won't touch the heart. So if you're a teacher, it's incumbent on you, on us, me, to transmit purely and follow. and deeply commit. Otherwise, no Shakti. Then it's just buddhi vritti, it's just intellectual buddhi vritti. So if your teachers, my friend, if you teach, you're teaching your Happy Jack, and all of those of you aspiring to be teachers, you want to transmit this. These are we have to take this seriously. And me more than everybody else, or as much as anybody else. So let's go back. So the Pandu king, lord of Sindhu, Sauvira kingdoms, heard these words of the Brahma. They were in accordance with all the sacred texts on yoga and had the potency to cut through the knot of ignorance in the heart. Despite what had just transpired, because of his genuine faith, he was, after all, going to the ashram to meet Kapila. He hastily got down and touched his head at Bharata's feet, begging forgiveness. And if we ever offend bhaktas, this is what we have to do, my friends. Beg forgiveness. And bhaktas, if they're real bhaktas, they instantly forgive. If you've ever offended, yogis and any being, all beings, but especially those dear to Vishnu, those dear to the Ishvara, no harm done, just apologize. I've had to make many apologies in my life from similar thing. You get pride because of learning, proud because of whatever concocted nonsense is in your head. And you just apologize. I finished. And then you actually, then the heart grows closer to the genuine bhakta is so happy to see the apology, so happy to see that humility and sincerity. You embrace and you become closer. It worked. Trust me, that's one thing I can say for sure. Right. Now, so he touched his head at Bharata's feet, begging forgiveness. His kingly pride evaporated just by 2 sentences from the great sage. The king at this point became fully qualified to inquire into truth. Why is he qualified? Because he is surrendered, he's given up his pride, and he's ready to listen. That's the qualification of the student. You're not there challenging, questioning, and of course in a genuine way, of course, but not in this arrogant, in condescending way, and humility at the feet of the teacher. And if you don't, the teacher won't say anything. My guru would stay silent if he saw that pride and that kind of inappropriate questioning that wasn't coming from a place of sincerity and genuine inquiry. He wouldn't say anything. He wouldn't be rude. He would just remain silent. So then the king says, now he's qualified to inquire into truth. He said, the king says to Bharata, you bear the sacred thread of the twice-born Brahmanas. So who are you, who wander about in disguise? Are you some ascetic renunciate? Whose son are you? Right. So if you're a Brahmana, you ask, what's the father? And then there's 10 Brahmin lineages, and then you know which Brahmin family you come in. Of course, all of that's irrelevant to yoga, but it's important for Dharma. So whose son are you? From where have you come here? For what purpose? If it is to uplift us, then you're perhaps the sage Kapila himself. He's going off to see the Kapila ashram, and he's wondering, my God, maybe this is Kapila. His words has penetrated his heart. I do not fear the thunderbolt of the king of the gods, Indra, nor the trident of the three-eyed god, Lord Shiva, nor the rod of Yama, god of death, nor the weapons of the gods of fire, Agni, sun, Surya, moon, Chandra, nor wind, Vayu, nor the treasure of the gods, Kuvera, but I greatly fear offending the Brahmana caste. Remember, the true Brahmanas. You have no attachments, and you roam about like a dullard, with the extraordinary potency of your wisdom remaining concealed. Please explain your words, which deal with yogic concepts. They're incomprehensible to my mind. Right now, these are genuine questions. This is what we should approach the guru with, these kinds of questions. I'm traveling on pilgrimage to ask Kapila this question. What is the refuge for those suffering in the world? Right, a bit like Parikshit's questions. Kapila is the ultimate guru of the sages who know the truth about the Atman. He's the Lord of yogis. He's Lord Hari Vishnu himself, incarnating his quality of knowledge in the form of Kapila. So Kapila is considered to be a Jnana avatara. Sankhya is Jnana, the different kinds of avatars, and Kapila is considered to be the Jnana avatara because he gives the Jnana of the tattvas, right? What is Purusha and Prakriti, and Prakriti, the 3 gunas, and Buddhi, and these are tattva means thatness. What is the that out there, right? Sankhya is about the tattvas. Okay, so you have the 3 gunas, and then things emerge from the gunas, and they become that tat. So tat means that, And tattva means thatnesses. Well, what is the that of the world? So what's the world made of? What are the thatnesses? Okay, there's subatomic particles, and there are vibrational qualities, and there's mental stuff, and then there's ego. So that those are the tattvas. So Kapila is a knowledge of that. It's jnana yoga. It's a type of jnana yoga, metaphysical type of jnana. Of course, the purpose of it is to, if you know what the thatness is, then you know what this is. I mean, that is only relevant that the meaning of that in the English language only has relevance as that is, as opposed to this. What, right? Otherwise, the word that has no sense. So therefore, that if I understand what the that is, then I know what the this is. So therefore, the path of Sankhya, different from other jnana traditions like Advaita Vedanta, takes a different approach. Nyaya, different approach. So there are different jnana schools, but the Sankhya jnana is, let's be very clear about what that is, and then once we sorted that out, then we know what's left then. This, consciousness. So therefore, even the intelligence is that, which Plato hadn't, which Plato, Sankhya would say Plato needed to take what he did was brilliant, but needed to take one further step. And even the buddhi, even intelligence is that, because you can witness it. So what's the this that's the witness? Okay, so the goal of Sankhya is the same, to get you to Purusha, but its method is, let's get rid of all the that's. The Upanishads call this neti neti. It's a little bit of a not iti, not this, not this, not this type of approach. You're doing that to get to the this, the Atman. So anyway, so he's off to see, maybe your Kapila, he says. Is it possible, good sir, that you're none other than Kapila? He wanders around, his true characteristics concealed, observing the condition of the world. How can someone whose spiritual intelligence is blind and who is bound up with attachments to hearth and home, how can someone, in other words, how can someone in avidya and asmita understand the ways of the Lord of yoga? So then he goes on, let's go to 24. Good sir, I've humiliated an exceptional saint due to my arrogance. So he's in a perfect state of mind now to receive knowledge, completely humble, apologetic. My arrogance in thinking I'm a lord of men. He thinks he's a king. He's recognizing his foolishness. Please bless, right? We all have to do this. We have to recognize. We think we're professors. We think we're this. We think we're that. We think we're some hotshot, this, that, or other yoga teacher. Come on, we all trapped by asmita, my friends. It's all just foolishness. You have to give it all up in a deep way, not just okay, I know I'm supposed to do that sort of way, but we have to do this while we're still alive. Right, so then once he approaches, please bless me with a favorable glance of compassion. Now he's ready to hear. Well, Bharata doesn't mince his words. He starts off, you would not be considered noteworthy in the company of those who are really learned, because you're not wise. But no, he just starts. He's very kind and compassionate, but now he's exerting his authority. He says, okay, you've approached me as a teacher. When you approach a teacher as a teacher, you know what guru means? Heavy. Once you've actually surrendered, then the guru, if you're ready for it, the guru can speak heavy words. Now, when it comes to ahimsa and satya, the first principle is ahimsa in the yamas of Patanjali, and then second comes satya. And there's a lovely conversation in the commentaries that ahimsa comes first because it must be respected first. And if there's a conflict between satyam and ahimsa has to be respected first. So which means you can't necessarily speak truth if it's going to cause violence, harm. In that case, you have to modify that. You can't be just bluntly truthful. But if the guru sees that the disciple is ready and can hear blunt truth, then he'll say it because he knows the disciple can hear it. If not, then you might have to flatter or not flatter, because that would be asatyam, but you might have to be more diplomatic. So because the king has really come to a place of humility, Bharata just tells him straight the truth. You wouldn't be considered noteworthy in the company of those who are really learned because you're not wise. Even though you're trying to speak the type of words spoken by the wise, those who are wise in the reflections on truth do not speak in the way you have about mundane relationships like king and subject. Along the same lines, so now, he's speaking bluntly because the king's ready to hear. Along the same lines, O king, a pure saint free from desire, who is no knower of truth. And anyway, our time is up. And then it goes on all of this jnana yoga. If you want to continue, I love this stuff. It gets into some real jnana here. Do you want to continue, or shall we stop and take questions? And does anybody? I mean, you could always go, right? You're not palanquin bearers. You don't have to stay. Let's just do another. I'm going to do another. I'm going to go on for a bit just because I don't want. It's such cool stuff. If you need to go, you can go. Obviously, you can. You don't need me to tell you that. Right. Let's see what he says. Right. Along the same lines, O king, a pure saint free of desire, who is a knower of truth, the Atman, Vedantin, usually does not take any satisfaction in the rhetoric of the ritualistic portions of the Veda. And here we see the Vedanta attitude to Vedic ritualism, because Vedic ritualism, it's beautiful, the chants are beautiful, but it's about gaining, the sacrifices offered to fulfill material desires. That's the old four Vedas and the literature associated with it. So the Vedanta takes this position right in the first verse of the Vedanta Sutra. Atata Brahma Jignaso. This first word is Atta, like Patanjali is Atta Yoga Anushasanam, the Atta now, right? So Vedanta Sutra, same. Atta, Attas, Brahma Jignasa. So then what's the Atta? What's the now? And Vedanta says the now is now you're exhausted with these Vedic rituals. Now you've done all that Vedic stuff and you've done all of that because you do all of that to get stuff, even sattvic stuff. Once you see the temporality of all of that, you're ready to go a bit deeper. Then pick up the Vedanta. So that's the position of. So this Bhagavata Purana is a Vedantic text. It's considered to be written by the author of the Vedanta himself, Badarayana. The tradition says wrote the Bhagavatam. Remember the story at the beginning? Remember? Vyasa is sitting kind of depressed. And his guru Narada comes down and says, and you've written everything, you wrote the Vedanta Sutra, you wrote a great epic, you divided the Vedas, but you haven't focused on the activities of Bhagavan. So that's why you're discontent. That's why there's this discontentedness in your mind. So, so the Bhagavatam is considered to be the ripened fruit of the Vedic. Of course, all Puranas will say that about themselves, but fair enough. Right. But anyway, here we get a glimpse at this sort of attitude. Not that it doesn't reject the Vedas. It just say that the real Paramahamsas, they don't take any satisfaction in the rhetoric of the ritualistic portion of the Vedas. You want a child, you do this. You want success, you do that. All of these kind of, it doesn't say it's wrong. It doesn't say it doesn't work. Yogis are not interested. Even though these give the appearance of great knowledge by presenting abundant information on elaborate household rituals, right? Astrological charts and gemology, and all of this is all about the material body, right? Abundant information, Dharma Shastras, but it really is talking about Vedic rituals, which really we could say are obsolete now. They've been obsolete for centuries. A few bits and pieces have survived. There was one community still keeping it all going in one village in Kerala, at least in the 1980s. And a book was written, it was all recorded, called by Fritz Stahl, and the book was called, in fact, my first book, I had a picture of it on the front cover of that real authentic Vedic ritual that had been not reconstructed by the government of India as a tourist thing, not like that, but real, genuine, handed down in these families that we've encountered here for millennia, my friends. I mean, if you go by even with interlogical dating, you go to 1500 BCE, even if you go by, dry academic dates, and there was still one community, I don't know what happened to it. They were called the Nambudiri Brahmanas. If anyone's been to the Shivananda ashram, they have two brothers who came from the Nambudiri Brahmana community, and one is in the, now just a, not just, but now a pujari the Bahamas, Shivananda Center, and the other one is a pujari in the Grass Valley in California. They're coming from that community, but so that community is a large community, but within that, there were still those who are actually doing authentic Vedic rituals. Be interesting to see where they are now. For one who does not come to the conclusion that the ephemeral happiness of the householder, oh, my friends, that the ephemeral happiness of the householders should be renounced voluntarily before you die, just like a dream. If you don't come to that conclusion, not even the wisest Vedic words, which are the Upanishads, are sufficient for realizing the direct experience of the truth of the self. My friends, that price tag is 100% free of desire. That's the price tag. Otherwise, you can be, benevolent and wise and learned and sattvic and kind and compassionate, lots of good qualities. You're not going to realize the Atman. This is 100%. 100%. As long as a person's mind is untamed and overwhelmed by sattva, rajas, and tamas, you've got to go beyond sattva. I mean, we might have to use sattva to get beyond sattva, but we have to get to sattva first, but sattva too. As long as it's overwhelmed by the gunas, it produces merit and demerit, karma, good and bad karma, because of the desires of the mind. Even sattvic desires, they're still desires, they're attachments, they create fruits. If you're gonna have desires, all right, fine, have sattvic desires, but you're just creating sattvic karma. Is that what you want? You want to come back sattvic? The mind is filled with past life memory impressions, vasanas. From past lives, we don't even know what they are. They subconsciously exert pressure on our conscious mind, but they're unconscious. But Freud's unconscious. Freud really stumbled upon something. He just didn't. Freud was limited because he didn't understand past life. He thought he had to explain it in one life, so he couldn't. So he just called it the id, the beast. He didn't know what to do with it. Let's call it the id. I don't know what id is in Latin. What's id? Like it or something? I don't know. But anyway, if he'd ever understood past lives, we'd have understood where the beast came from. That kind of terrifying potential in the unconscious. So it's filled with past life memory impressions. It's pervaded by desires for sense objects. It's subject to the flow of the gunas. We change all the time. 1 minute we're sattvic, do a little meditation, and the next minute we're thrust into rajas, and somebody says something, tamas. It's always undergoing change because of desires and the like. It is chief among the 16 categories of Sankhya, right? What are the 16? The 5 working senses, 5 knowledge acquiring senses, 5 gross elements. I don't know. 16. Well, it should be 20, or maybe I should have said 5 subtle elements. I must have looked at the comment. Doesn't matter. The mind is beyond that. That mind taking on different forms in samsara with different names, man, beast, bird, and so on. Right now your subtle body is manifesting the personality of a bird. Then the samskaras appropriate for that are activated. The ones that need to be burnt in a bird body, they get activated. All the rest gets pushed into the unconscious, covered by tamas. All the other infinite samskaras pushed into the subconscious, and a little cluster of birdie samskaras manifests, and now you're a bird. And then your bird dies. Okay, burnt up those samskaras, and some other cluster pops up. Tiger. Okay, now you're a tiger, and and so on. They've taken different forms, different names, man, beast, bird, and so some high, some low, right? Snakes, bugs, cockroaches, celestials. The mind manifests in different bodies. It's the same mind. The mind, which it's a prakritic mind, though. It's a creation of Maya. Prakriti is Maya. Maya means the 3 gunas. It's not some other thing. There's only Sankhya. Maya isn't on the chart. Why isn't Maya on the chart? Because Maya is the 3 gunas. Devihi isha gunamayi, mama Maya. Krishna says, Devihi isha gunamayi, mama Maya. This Maya is my Maya, and it's divine. And what is it? It's with the 3 gunas. Not some other thing. If it was some other thing, then you'd look at your Sankhya chart and you'd have another little arrow going, say, Maya. You'd have Purusha Prakriti, and then your Buddhi, your Hankar, and then you'd have Samara floating off with Maya. No, you don't. Why? Because it's the 3 gunas. Maya is the 3 gunas. Okay. So, the mind, which is the creation of Maya, envelops the Atman with which it is associated. In due course of time, it causes the experience of the fruits of action. Everything we do bears a fruit. Fruit is just another word for effect. Action is the cause. So fruits of action is just a cause and effect, just a different way of talking about cause and effect. And what is the effect? In the form of intense happiness and distress and all the shades that lie between them. It is the cause of the illusion of the cycle of birth and death. For as long as the mind exists, conventional reality, samsara, remains manifest and ongoing. The mind is, we're in samsara because the mind exists. So liberation is getting rid of the mind. And the Atman, also known as Kshetrajna in the Gita, the knower of the field. The field is Prakriti, samsara, and then there's the knower. So everything out there is the Kshetra, the field, and there's the Gna, the knower. The Atman is subject to the experience of gross and subtle bodily forms. It is because of this that the wise say that this mind is the cause both of lower experience under the influence of the gunas, as well as of higher existence, liberation, the state beyond the influence of the gunas. So Krishna says the mind is your friend and your enemy. Patanjali says it's the klishta or aklishta, all the same thing, all the set talking about the same thing. You're just using different vocabularies. What does he say in verse 5, Patanjali? Vritayaha, panchatayaha, klishta, aklishta. Well, what does that mean? It's either under the kleshas or it's not under the kleshas. What does it say here? The mind is either trapped by the gunas or it's not. It's a state beyond the influence of the gunas. If the mind is influenced by the gunas, it leads the living beings to calamity, meaning rebirth. If it transcends the gunas, it leads to liberation. It's just like a lamp which emits a smoky flame when it's consuming its ghee wick, but otherwise, once it has burned up all the ghee, enjoys its own nature, burning purely. I don't know if that works, but let's try to make it work. So you have a ghee lamp, and when there's ghee, it's smoky, but when there's no ghee, I guess he's saying it burns itself. Oh yeah, it burns itself as the wick. The wick. There's no ghee, so there's no smoke. So the wick is burning, but it's not smoky. But of course, pretty quickly, that wick is going to be consumed, and that's it. So it does work. It's a nice metaphor. In the same, right? Then no more wick, no more action-reaction, no more rebirth, no more samsara. And what does Patanjali say? Hanam tadrishahe kevalyam. That's the liberation of the seer. In the same manner, when the mind takes recourse to its various states, vrittis, here we are, vrittis, my friends, vrittis. Well, finally, we got a word we recognize. When the mind takes response to its various vrittis, right? When the vrittis arise and act, it is bound by karma and the gunas. But when it does not, right, nirodha, or when the mind is fixed on Bhagavan, it's not acting out of body, mind, desire anymore, it resorts to its own true nature. Notice this, the mind is 11 vrittis. How about this? So Patanjali is, he's schematizing it in one way. There's different ways of schematizing this. We saw that in the 8 limbs of yoga. Remember, there was lots of overlap, but sometimes different, different kind of, remember, Ishvara Pranidhana was called, Ishvara something else, Archana or something. Whatever these 11. But 5 related to the knowledge acquiring senses. So that would be vrittis coming from things you see, smell, hear, and the 5 senses. 5 related to the working senses. So the vritti when you're using your hands, there's vrittis in the mind when you're using your legs, there's vrittis when you're using your stomach, there's vrittis when you're pooping, and there's vrittis when you're the tongue. And 1 related to the ego. So that ego, it creates its own vritti according to this. They say these vrittis have 11 fields of activity, which are their respective objects, right? So the eye is the object of sight, the nose, etc. And so it goes on. So smell, form, touch, taste, and sound, the objects of the knowledge acquiring senses, evacuation, sexual intercourse. Oh, I missed that one, right? Locomotion, speech, and grasping, functions of the working senses, right? So that would be the anus, the genitals, the legs, the tongue, and the hands. The functions of the walking senses, along with accepting the body as mine, are the 11. But some say this eye is the 12th. Notice there's, difference. That's why Patanjali says Anushasanam is continuing. There were different nuances, and no difference in the metaphysics, but different ways of framing it. Just like there's different, Iyengar yoga, and there's and then there's Patabi Joyce and Vinyasa and so forth. These 11 functions of the mind multiply into hundreds and thousands and millions of vrittis in accordance with time, karma, latent. Each thought is its own vritti. In accordance with time, karma, samskara, nature, and specific material objects, but they do not exist for themselves or for each other. They exist for the sake of the Atman, the kshetrajna, the Atman, the witness, this what Patanjali calls the seer, the drashtra. Although pure meaning it doesn't need to be mixed with vrittis. What does pure mean? If you have milk and it's impure, it's mixed with water. If you have gold and it's impure, it's mixed with iron. So when the mind doesn't need to be mixed, if it's not mixed, then what is it? Svarupe vastanam, absorbed in its own nature. But when it's mixed with these hundreds of millions of vrittis. And therefore, even though it's pure, it witnesses these never-ending states of the mind. Never-ending, my friends. Your mind is relentless, always thinking, just making up mad stories, making up just insane, fearful stories about this is going to happen, that going to, this person said that person. We're trapped by our minds. They are sometimes manifest, sometimes unmanifest in deep sleep. The mind is created by Maya as a covering of the Jiva's soul. It's an impure agent because it's subject to ignorance and the like. Of course, it can be your friend, as Krishna says. There is a supreme kshetrajna, not the Atman, who is also an Atman, but a Paramatman. Like Patanjali says, is a Purusha Vishesha Ishvara. Also Purusha, meaning it's also consciousness. It's not made of the gunas. If Ishvara is not made of the gunas, what's he made of then? Satchidananda. Well, what's that then? Purusha. So he's also Purusha. He's also an Atman. But how's he different then? Paramatma, Purusha Vishesha, right? This is not a Dvaita Vedanta. Dvaita Vedanta doesn't accept this. But Vaishnava Bhagavata theology does. That God is eternally distinct. The difference between Advaita Vedanta and Vaishnava Vedanta. He's primordial, unborn, self-luminous, directly experienced, and Lord of all. He's known as Narayana, Bhagavan, Vasudeva. The two mantras given in this text are Om Namo Narayanaya and Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. If you want to try a mantra, my friends, take Om Namo Narayanaya if you feel connected to Krishna Machari, and I've told you before, there has to be a reason to accept it. It's not whimsical, accept a mantra. It's not just go like you just go to shopping and just pull something off the shelf. It has to come to you. So Patanjali gives you the Om, but that's not very devotionally developed. Bhakti in the Patanjali is so minimalistic. I mean, the commentator Vyasa says, yes, it's Bhakti, but only just. But if you feel a connection with Guruji Iyengar, then Krishna Machara, you feel you have faith, you feel these are beings that you feel are trustworthy, then take that mantra, Om Namo Narayanaya. Or if then there's Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. You can chant those mantras. And my own mantra is the Hare Krishna mantra, but it doesn't, that's me. I encountered the mantra in the way I encountered it. There's nothing sectarian about it. Sri Chaitanya said you have millions of names and you've fully empowered all of them. I don't know where this sectarianism comes from. It's not very attractive. Only this mantra. But at the same time, don't go jumping around like a monkey. Once you have a heart connection with your form of Ishwar, don't just go jumping about. It's monogamy, my friends. Bhakti is monogamy. It's monogamous. Find your form and then give your heart to that form and take the name of that form. That's it for the rest of your life. I mean, the beginning, you're not sure. Okay, you could a little bit try this and that, but once you really, it's monogamous. So those are so this is it. Okay, my friends, how are we doing? Just as there. Okay, who is this the great soul? He is Narayana, Bhagavan, Vasudeva. He controls through his Maya power from within the Atman. So he's finer than the Atman. Ramanuja calls it the Antaryami. That in other words, the Atman is supporting the body, but Narayana is supporting both the Atman and the world. He's the Antaryami. Look, from within the Atman. What does that mean within the Atman? The Atman doesn't have an inside or an outside, but there is a sustainer greater than the Atman. This is not Advaita Vedanta. Advaita Vedanta would not accept this. Vaishnava Vedanta. Just as air, after entering within all moving and non-moving entities, controls them from within in the form of breath, so does the Supreme, Bhagavan, Vasudeva, Supreme Atman, the Kshetrajna, all of these, they enter into this world. O Lord of men, as long as an embodied, how long does this chapter go on for? Ooh, quite long. Maybe we'll decide, we'll stop soon. So, Lord of men, as long as an embodied being is not shaken off this Maya by means of awakening knowledge, has not conquered the 6 enemies that are coming up next, and has not become free of all attachment, has not realized the true nature of the Atman, he or she must wander in this world of samsara. Why aren't we taking this seriously, my friend? Such a person can, that's you and me, not such a person, you and me, continues wandering in samsara until he or she realizes the mind, which masquerades as the self. We think the mind is us. We think, I am happy, I am sad, I am this, I am that. It masquerades, it's a masquerade, it's a parasite. It's parasitic. Until he realizes that the mind, which masquerades as the self, plants this, the mind which plants the seeds of suffering and samsara. It's our desires, our aversions, our kleshas, our ignorance, our ego. It's the mind that's doing all that. It causes enmity, right? I don't like this one. I like greed, desire, disease, illusion, and sorrow. It is the creator of the sense of ownership, the ego. With diligence, Krishna says the same thing. Arjuna says, how do I control this mind? It's stubborn. Krishna says, abhyasa vairagi, says the same 2 things as Patanjali says. Have you known that? Have you seen that in the Gita? Arjuna says at the end of chapter 2, I think, or 3, maybe 2, it's harder to control this mind than the wind. No, chapter 6. Arjuna says, yes, it's hard, but you can do it. Abhyasa vairagyabhyam. Same here. With diligence, defeat this enemy of the mind with the weapon of the worship. Now, notice this. The weapon of the worship of the lotus feet of Hari. Bhakti. Complete surrender. The Supreme Guru. He's the Guru. Don't go running around looking for Guru. Hari is the Guru. Don't run around looking for a Guru. You get cheated, my friends. Take Ishvara as your guru, and then if Ishvara wants you to meet someone, you'll meet someone. Don't even think about it. Go with Ishvara. Otherwise, you just bump into, you just find some charismatic person with a big ego. That's all, and you'll be all. In 10 years later, you'll realize it. You got ripped off. Don't do it. Take Ishvara as your guru. This mind is extremely powerful and has become stronger by neglect. It is an imposter and presents itself as if it were the true self. How about that? Okay, we'll stop there. Okay, so now Rahugana then raises some more questions, and this is beautiful. I mean, I could go on all night, frankly, because when we enter into the Bhagavatam, we're not in mundane space and time anymore. So we could go on all night. But why don't we take a moment to see if anybody wants to say anything. Shanti. Go ahead, Shanti.
Oops. Namaste, Edwin ji. It is basically to clear my own doubts. I'm trying to clarify my own questions. We talked about vasanas, samskaras, vrittis, and the karma. So Bharata was a jnani, yet he fell into the attachment into the deer, which may cost the whole cycle of birth from a deer to being a dull-witted person. And
wait, Shanti, he was not dull-witted. He was brilliant. He pretended to be dull-witted so that everyone would leave him alone. He was not dull-witted. He that was all a facade because he didn't want to get attached again.
Yes. So he was totally aware of his consciousness. He was conscious of each of these births. Am I right in
yes, but his dull-wittedness was not real. Like the birth.
Yes, but he was aware of this facade.
Okay, yes, he was aware of the facade. Yeah, obviously, yeah.
Okay, he was aware of his birth as a deer.
Yes.
Okay, now he has become the teacher of the Pandu king.
Yes.
Okay, now am I right in thinking that his karmic attachment to this fawn got him into all this cycle?
Yes.
Because ultimately he had to teach Raghu Nanda the
Raghunath.
story.
We don't know that, Shanti. We don't know that. The text doesn't take us to, it doesn't make that connection. I understand what you're saying. Clearly, there must have been some karmic, some not karmic in a mundane sense, but some spiritual bond between Rahugana and Bharata. But the text doesn't say that to us. You can guess that. It's nothing wrong. It wouldn't be illogical, but the text doesn't make that explicit to us, that this whole thing was so that he would come and then be the guru. It doesn't, no, that's not the lesson of the text. The lesson of the text is the attachment, any kind of attachment has these unfortunate consequences.
Okay, so then what is confusing in my mind is that Bharata being such a jnani, fell into this attachment to this fawn, which got him into this spiral of samskaric life.
So if that happens to him, what to speak of you and I? Yes.
Exactly.
Yes,
so is there some kind of a salvation for me then?
Vishnu, Krishna, the lotus feet of Krishna, you cling desperately, knowing how utterly treacherous and formidable is Maya. There is only one way out in the bhakti traditions. Jnana won't do it. He had jnana. The only way is to cling absolutely desperately to the feet of Krishna, and that is samarpana, that is Ishvara pranidhana, that is, and it has to be 100%. So that's another lesson, yes. That Krishna says, Devi hi esha gunamayi mama maya dur atyaya. Dur, hard, atyaya, to surpass. Devi hi, it's divine. Mama maya, it's mine. Mamevam ye prapadyante, but if you surrender to me, maya metam tarantite, you will surpass. It's Krishna's maya, Vishnu, Narayana. So if we surrender to Krishna, to Bhagavan, then we can do. And the story illustrates, without that, if we have any ego, any sense that I can do it with my jnana, I'm a jnani, I can, even with my yogic prowess, if we think like that, we get ensnared. We run the risk, a great risk of getting ensnared, even if we attain high, lofty states of samadhi.
Okay, and I don't want to take up your time, but piggybacking to this, somewhere here we say that there was that every creature is born, like a worm, a bird. So it's because of the karmic, would I say it's a karmic, but some of these are born with awareness. Like that elephant, Gajendra, who was born with that devotion to Vishnu.
Well, okay, but that's very, very, very rare. The stories are not, they're not communicating that animals can have these kinds of abilities. There are rare cases, but those rare cases are illustrating some other kind of principle. So, 99.99999% of non-humans are simply trapped by karma, and they can do nothing until their karma is burnt up and they come back to the human form. So the very, very, rare, like, Hanuman and whatever, and Gajendra, and that these are rare exceptions, and they're illustrating something else. They're illustrating the power of bhakti, or Gajendra is illustrating that, okay, even a dumb beast, fine. Anybody, even a dumb beast, and he's not even doing it out of bhakti. Gajendra's not doing it out of bhakti, he's just doing it out of a material, desperation. But even then, if it's a sincere, total surrender, even though his motive is not, approaching God or love or nothing, he just wants to get out of the grip of the alligator. But so that's the point of that story. So you have to identify the point of the story. But other than these theological narratives, creatures cannot be aware. Very, very, very rare. You'll find an odd story here and there, of course. Why not? Why shouldn't it be possible that because of some fall down, a great yogi has to take another birth, but that he or she was a great yogi, and therefore there's some very, very, very occasional possibility that human awareness will get reactivated, will remain sattvic. There'll be enough sattva to remember, but those are just very, very rare, and they usually illustrate some other kind of theological point.
So it is only in my human birth can I have this opportunity to burn up my karma?
Yes, Shanti, yes, and that's why we should not waste any more time.
Okay.
His hair is getting white. Look, hair is getting white. These are the
Yes,
signs. These are the linga, the signs. And body is getting, useless. So therefore but one thing we can do very well now, which maybe we couldn't do so well when we were young and passionate and rajasic and all the places to go and people to meet and all these mad illusions. We couldn't do it so well, but now we can do it. So old age is our friend. It's our friend. It's our guru. Old age is our guru.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Susan.
I don't have a question.
Yeah.
But I felt compelled to share this with you.
Yeah.
I'm in Florida.
Yeah.
On Fort Myers Beach.
Yeah.
Hurricane Ivan came through my house, and the storm surge was 4 feet. My house is destroyed. My car is gone. However, on the coffee table in the living room was my book. My Bhagavad, your book that I use for class. And as I go into my house with the mud up the walls, on the coffee table is that book. It is not damaged. It is not wet. I do not know why, but I just had to tell you.
That's beautiful, Susan. Thank you so much.
Almost all the rest of my books are gone, but I have that one. And I just wanted to share that with you.
That's beautiful.
So
remember,
thank you.
You're welcome. Remember, it's not my book. It's the Bhagavata Purana.
True.
So that's Bhagavan.
Yes.
In the Bhagavata tradition, we consider that the Bhagavata is a kind of literary presence of the divine. But I hope you get everything sorted out, and
Well, it's a lesson of vairagya for sure.
Yeah.
So, but thank you for your teaching. I know that book survived for a reason.
Excellent. Okay, but I hope you get everything together nonetheless. Good luck with it all. Andrea, thank you, Susan.
Hi.
Yeah.
I have a broad question that I'll try and articulate the best I can, but I do find Om I don't find Om satisfying. I also very much have many, many, many years of just thinking from a sort of perennial point of view. And I see that there are other options that I might find more satisfying. I feel like the notion of a personal God would be satisfying if I could get there, and I just can't get there. And I wonder if it came naturally to you, or if you might have some words.
Om is impersonal. So it is. So Brahman has personal and impersonal modalities, and that's understood differently in Advaita Vedanta than in Vaishnava Vedanta. So I'm just going to talk from the perspective of Vaishnava Vedanta, because the Bhagavata is Vaishnava Vedanta. So Om is impersonal. So those who seek the Atman, impersonal, that is a favored mantra of the Atman seekers. But those who have a very strong relationship with a personal deity, that Om is a seed which doesn't satisfy. So they want, just like if you put a seed in the ground, you're not really satisfied until it produces whatever it's going to produce, a tree or a bush. And so therefore, those who have a strong devotional relationship with the beloved presence of Ishvara, they take that seed and they take the sort of more flourished form of the seed, and for them that Om becomes Om Namo Shivaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, depending on the form that captures their heart. Om Namo Narayanaya. So that's the first thing. Om is not going to be satisfying to anyone who has a sense that something beyond themselves, that is an intelligent. There's some intelligence, some personal intelligence beyond themselves. If you have a sense, there must be something higher than yourself, because we're in Maya. So how on earth could we be the ultimate? If we're the ultimate, why on earth are we in Maya? Unless you want to say it's all Leela, but that doesn't work for the Bhagavatam. It's not going to accept that as So if one can sort of accept or consider the possibility that there's a higher presence, then the next thing is, well, how do we encounter that? And the very first thing that's discussed maybe not the first, the second thing that's discussed in the Vedanta Sutra, it's discussed actually in the third sutra. I'll take that back. The third sutra is, we might be able to know that there's some supreme intelligence by making an inference, by saying that there must be design, like nowadays we would call it intelligent design. There must be some kind of intelligence behind the order of the universe. That's all it is. There must be intelligence. To say it's all random is just silly. I mean, many would agree with that today, even amongst scientists and philosophers. Although, okay, let me not ramble. So reason, you can come to that place by reason. There must be a higher intelligence, but in the third sutra of the Vedanta, Ramanuja specifically says that's as far as you can go with intelligence, but with reason. You can know that there's something, and that thing must be intelligent because it's behind order, and order requires intelligence, and that's all you can know. So if you want to know by reason, by your own speculative abilities, but if you want to know more about that entity, then it can only reveal itself. So there's certain sort of presuppositions that form a chain here. The first presupposition is there must be intelligence behind order. If you tick that box and you accept that, right? Because the materialist wouldn't. Materialists would just say, well, let it be random. Why should there be intelligence? Why can't it just be, and then you come up with multiple universes, like, okay, if there's billions and billions of universes, and maybe one of them, everything would fall into place, and we'd have creation, and all the rest of them it's by the laws of chance. So you come up with all these completely unverifiable proposals, but that's an option. Now, however, the first assumption is the first, let's say, commitment that one makes is that I don't accept that materialistic view. I opt for the view that there's intelligence, right? Then the next step is, and I can't understand the nature of that intelligence with my own human reason because it's too limited. My human reason is limited to what I can perceive at my window and inferences that I make based on perception. So therefore, I can't figure out. I can vaguely accept there's an intelligence, but my own human reason can do no more than that. Can't take me any further than that. If that's the second building block, that's the second sort of step in the chain of things. The third step is, well, if there is an intelligence and it is intimately connected with the world because it's ordered it, then there must be a reason for existence, right? Because there's order in the universe and we're in the universe. So there must be some ordered goal of existence. And since I can't figure out what it is, and since that intelligence is ordered, then there's a very good chance that intelligence communicates, right? Patanjali says that Ishvara is the guru of the ancients. Even Patanjali says it in his couple of 4 sutras on Ishvara. So therefore, if you're able to consider the possibility that there might be communication, well, we call that sounds like alien communication, but in religious parlance, we call that revelation. So if you're open to the possibility, that's the third step. Okay, perhaps this truth, reveals itself. So then the next step is, okay, if I can, I'm not necessarily ready to sign off, everything, but I'm willing to go with this. Fair enough. Let me now consider the revelations of the great revelation. It don't have to be great, but the revelations traditions that, that claim to reveal God, right? So then you think, well, it makes more sense to, to consider something that's been around centuries and centuries, because it's time worn, it's been accepted by great beings over the centuries. So it's probably a better place to start than some random stranger claiming to be God, in 1960, right? So then we go with time-tested revelations, and then we have the Old Testament, and then we talked about God, and then we have the Quran, and then for some reason or other, we all obviously here have a intimate relationship with Hinduism. So let's say we, for whatever reason, we've ended up in this thing called Hinduism. So then we say, okay, let's see what these Hindu traditions have to say about God. And then we encounter the Bhagavata Purana, which is what we're reading, and how God is revealed there. And we'll be reading the 10th book in our last session together. And then, of course, there's the Shiva Purana, and then the Devi Purana, and we'll find other what claim to be revelations about the nature of God. Now, if we, with sincere hearts and genuine, we're not ready to sign anything, fine, fair enough, but we're seekers. That's what a seeker is. So we keep going. So we then we read. Now, if we do that with sincere humility and surrender, not to anything yet, but just to surrender to the fact that we're ignorant, surrender to the fact that we need help from beyond. If we can accept that much, and that you asked about my story, well, that was my story. I was sitting on a bus in North, just coming down from Dharamsala in the Himalayas in 1978 or 79. And I, had sort of been up there studying Buddhism, and I knew that wasn't for me. And I just sat. I remember, so many years in India, and all the memories fade away, but certain memories stay. Because India, you have so many adventures every day. After a while, they're not adventures anymore; they're just India. But especially if you're walking around as a sadhu. But I remember this: sitting on the back of the bus and coming down and thinking, that wasn't, whatever. But praying deeply and desperately, in the most genuine, completely humble, completely aware of my inability to and I knew there was something greater than me. I was blessed with that much, at least. That samskara was clear to me, maybe from past life, maybe Catholic upbringing, I don't know. But clear to me that I might be a spark of God, but I am not the end of there's something eternally greater than me. I was a theist, a monotheist in my heart. And therefore, so I had that samskara, and you could say, where does that come from? Well, who knows? Past life, we'll never answer that question. So then I just prayed and surrendered, and within a week I was in Vrindavan. A complete accident. I had no intention of going there. I never heard of Vrindavan. Had nothing to do with Krishna. I was on my way to some Buddhist conference, sort of half-heartedly, because I didn't know what else to do. And I was sort of thinking I'm a Buddhist, but I wasn't thinking I was a Buddhist. I thought, well, all right, let's just go along with this for now. And then I was on this train going to Agra, and everybody told me that, in those days people hadn't met Westerners, lots of people, and they were fascinated, and I was just learning Hindi, and they were chatting away, and I told them I'm here to seek truth. I'm just answering your question about how it happened for me. What happened to me was I prayed absolutely with complete desperation and complete just a plea from the deepest possible place. And then completely accidentally, I ended up in Vrindavan. I mean, accidentally. I didn't even never heard of the place. I got off the train because these people kept telling me, oh, look, you must visit, you just visit Vrindavan. And I'm like, why? They said, well, they were so sincere. I thought, all right, well, I don't get off the train. What do I care? I was wondering about anyway. So I got off the train, and then this bus came. I don't even remember getting on the bus. I do not remember getting on the bus. The bus was going from Mathura train station to Vrindavan. Doesn't have a train station. And next thing I was in Vrindavan. So that's how it happened. And I think what I'm communicating here is not the specifics of my story, but this deep, if you put those pieces in place. Number one, that there's intelligence behind the universe. But number two, it's not me. I mean, I might be a spark of it, but there's something greater than me. Number three, human reason is never going to know anything about it other than there's something. And number four, okay, well, if there is something, let's assume it's benevolent. let's assume that since the universe is ordered, there's some order to existence, and the only way we can figure out what the order of our own being is, and our own what are we here for? It has to be revealed. And then the next step is, okay, let's check out Revelations. And the next thing is, okay, well, we somehow or other we're in this field called Hinduism. And then start reading. Okay, so where am I going to end up with all this? Start reading the stories of the various forms of Ishvara. And with that kind of humility and surrender, and I would, if it is my belief that but the sincerity has to be there. Nothing, no mental thing, no intellectual thing, no knowledge thing, none of that. Sincerity of the heart, a form of Ishvara will capture your heart. And that becomes your Ishta Devata. And then your Om becomes Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, or Om Namo Shivaya. It takes on the form of Ishvara. That's how it should work. But the key is sincerity, nothing else. And it's sincerity that manifests in the deepest possible surrender, even if you don't have a clue what you're surrendering to. You know that you're surrendering to something. That's something's benevolent. That's all it's waiting for. That it's not waiting for anything else. There's no other purpose for existence. We're eternal children of God. We're servants. Servants is a lover. A lover is a servant. If you love someone, you serve that person. We're lovers. We have the potential to be intimate. We see with Krishna, and then Krishna gets conquered. Then he serves the bhakta. We see in the lovely stories. His mother says, dance, and he dances. The unconquerable one becomes conquered. But that's a bit away. Let's not go there quite yet. But for now, it's just a surrender of the heart. I think you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you very much for that. A further question to that is something that feels like an obstacle to me. You seem to talk about culture as just a sort of overlay that's not relevant to the teachings. My mind is very seeped in thinking of institutional racism, sexism, rape culture, whatever these things are. So it feels harder to pull the two apart. And the whole notion of Kali Yuga is very difficult for me. I see that there are other possibilities, and that the way I've been thinking is not necessarily in my own best interest. But I've been very attached to an idea of like history as the world scoping open to God, something very Hegelian. And when I'm looking at teachings that are coming from this whole culture where now we're in Kali Yuga, it's hard because civil liberties and basics.
Sure. Well, I would just say that if culture is not ultimately the goal of the Atman transcends any kind of culture. I think that's the point the texts are making. Atma is beyond. Now, to get there, you either take the path of action or inaction. So the stories we looked at, Bharata today, the third life, that was it. He'd been a king, remember? He'd followed karma yoga for many years. But the path of action is, if you feel you're an activist, if you feel that your nature, right? It's a kind of a warrior nature, actually. Activism is a kind of a kshatriya nature. That would be, if you feel pulled by that nature to confront unrighteousness and all the isms, the racism and sexism, then the Bhagavad Gita gives a yogic way of doing that, and it calls it karma yoga. And karma yoga is when you follow your nature, which if let's go with what you were describing, that you feel a strong pull to resist the isms of the world, then there's a way of doing that without attachment to the fruit, and that's called karma yoga, and that's outlined in the Bhagavad Gita, and you'll see it also in the Bhagavatam. There are stories of karma yogins who don't go and sit on the banks of the river to meditate. They act in the world, and but they're acting from a place of desirelessness. So in that type of action yoga, culture is not irrelevant. Culture, and of course, there's a Vedic culture that the Bhagavatam considers to be the highest type of culture, with the Brahmanas, real Brahmanas, and Kshatriyas, and heavy kind of the heavy cultural presence of enlightened beings, and Brahmanas who should be enlightened. And so clearly, it's going to present its own culture as the highest, as I'm sure Islam would, and Christians might have done in the Middle Ages. So there is the path of karma yoga, the path of action, and then the path of bhakti is, okay, do the karma yoga, fine, but then offer all of that to Bhagavan. So and what makes it yoga and not just karma? Because activism can be karma, it can be good karma, right? Because you're fighting for the downtrodden and the oppressed and the abused. So that could be good karma. But what makes it yoga is that you do that with no personal. There's no desire. You're not hoping or you're not doing it for any personal gain. Personal meaning body, mind, you. You're doing it for the Atman. It's fine. It's good to desire. You have to desire the Atman, but the desires are not centered on body, mind. So then it becomes karma yoga. So you don't have to renounce culture, but you can engage in the culture or whatever you understand culture as being. Right now we have this probably hybrid, half yoga, half Western, and there's going to be all this cross-fertilization. So it's not like a clear-cut Vedic culture that there was at the time of the Bhagavatam, which are the Dharma Shastras. Everything was sort of clearly defined. What is the king supposed to do? What the Brahman is supposed to do? Clearly, that's not the case anymore. And modern India is as polluted and corrupt as can possibly be, and in its quest to be a great power. So, but we have to create our own sort of melange of yoga and anti-isms, and fine, we put all that together, but we're not following the Dharma Shastras anymore, which tell us how to be an activist, which tell us how to be a Brahmin. Those texts are no longer valid. So in terms of how we act, the actual action we do in the world, we have to put that together. But the principle of yoga means whatever that is, we have to do it without any self-interest at all, if we want to be active in the world. No self-interest at all. And remember, the self in this case would be body, mind, self. We're allowed to be interested in the Atman self and desire the Atman self. We have to. Otherwise, you wouldn't take the path of yoga if you didn't. And we have to desire God. We have to. So that desire is a completely different desire than desires that seeks satisfaction of body, mind. So then it becomes karma yoga, which can morph into bhakti if we offer it all to God. So there's a lot in there which you can't really unpack in 2 minutes, but the principle being, to act, if you're called to activism, then to do all of that with no self-interest, just purely out of duty. No, and the way you'll know if you're successful is you're not going to be happy, sad, happy, sad, happy, sad. Because if you have a desire, you're happy when you gain it and sad when you don't. So the mind is always sukha dukkha, sukha dukkha, sukha dukkha. But if you're really purely acting out of duty and doing your duty to resist aggression and abuse, if you're a warrior, and that's what an activist is a warrior. Would be, if you want to plug it into a Vedic way of thinking, that would be the second caste, the warrior caste. They're the activists. They're the ones that protect righteousness. If you want to do that, that's a strong calling, right? So you don't want to take the path of inaction. Maybe you take the path of inaction, when you're 50 or you're 60 or you're 70, that can come later. But right now in the world, so then karma yoga, which you can be a karma yogin and be an atheist. But if you are a theist, then your karma yoga is offered to God, and that becomes bhakti yoga. The same action, the same karma becomes bhakti when it's offered to Bhagavan. And that's something to think about, and read the second and third chapter of the Gita for that. Gita chapter 2, 3, and 2, 3. That's really where Krishna lays it out.
I actually don't feel called to activism at all. I'll try and articulate it again. It's something more about when so many people haven't had rights until so recently, how can we be in like the worst time? and how I feel so called, and so like I feel so attached to all, like I feel all of these texts. I feel it all, but well, the mind gets in the way.
But basically, you're questioning the whole notion of Kali Yuga. You're saying, according to Kali Yuga, things are supposed to be degenerating, yet what we see is, since the Middle Ages, or since, from our own sense of recorded history, we see that things are not degenerating, but rather, there's been, great movements in, and we abolished slavery in most countries of the world, and women are slowly in the Western countries coming to a place of equality, and so forth. I don't know. I'm not sure I have a good answer for that, other than to say, when the texts talk about degradation, they're talking about, okay, you're also talking about moral qualities of humanism and equality. Okay, so what you're saying is, anti-ism is a kind of humanism, but the text would say that other moral qualities are declining, like austerity, and I think it's clear that austerity is declining, and that's perhaps okay. So fair enough, we're resisting isms, but look what we've done to our planet. We've destroyed our planet. So how about that for Kali Yuga? And why are we destroying our planet? Because of consumption. And what's consumption? Unrestricted desire and no more austerity. So how about that as a decline then, when there is no curtailment of consumption? Not only that, but consumption is glorified because that's what a capitalist economy requires. It requires consumption, otherwise it can't function. So how about we think of that as a sign of, and number one. Number two, non-violence. Think of the millions of animals killed. Think of McDonald's boast about, what is it, 100 million served, 10, whatever the number is. How about we take that as a sign of Kali Yuga? So if we take the different set of moral qualities, you're talking about an important set of, humanistic qualities, but what about controlling desire, non-violence? What about truthfulness? There's no truthfulness in a democratic political system. You can't be truthful. You can't. By the nature of democracy, you have to get votes. So you have to say what people want to say. I mean, obviously, Trump has utterly and completely exemplified, untruthfulness. But any kind of, so how about that as a sign of Kali Yuga, that the decline of truthfulness and so forth? So it depends on what sort of moral values we're looking at. But if we look at certain moral values, we could make an argument for a massive decline. Certainly, people have always eaten meat. Even in India, the warriors were allowed to eat meat, although it's, very fast. When I went to India, 60% of Indians were vegetarians. And in my own lifetime now, it's 40. So the 20% decline. But even in ancient India, certain warriors were allowed to eat meat. So there was meat, some consumption of meat. But think of the hundreds of millions, not hundreds of millions. And cows never, ever killed. Cow is for reasons we could discuss. So if we're judging it from that kind of a moral lens, right? Nonviolence, truthfulness, consumption, right? Then we could make a case for decline if we're looking at those types of moral values. So I don't know. So I hear your question. I do hear your question, and that's the best I can do in terms of an answer.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Zoltan.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
So my question is, in the text it's mentioned that the mind can transcend the gunas, but isn't the mind made of gunas?
Yeah.
So even in a
well done, Zoltan. Well done. That's really good. That was really very keen.
This is for me a long question, because even the Gita in chapter 14, Arjuna asks Krishna the qualities of somebody who transcends the mind, transcends the gunas. Sorry.
Yeah.
But if you look at the Sankhya metaphysics, then who transcends the gunas? Because the Purusha or Atman is free from it, and the mind is made of gunas. So
yeah. It's a great question, and I was thinking a little bit like that when we read that. Here's the best I can do. Obviously, if you really transcend the guna, then you're in a state of sarupe vastanama, you're transfunctional. You're transfunctional. You could call that dysfunctional, but more politely, we say transfunctional. No action at all, no activity. Like when Parikshit, were you here at the first session when Parikshit put the snake on the shoulders of Shamika? So Shamika was in a state of transfunctionality. His mind was not working. He did not feel it. He did not hear. So that's really what going beyond the gunas actually means. So I would take it slightly rhetorically that as long as your mind is functioning, it is a prakritic mind and it is made of the gunas, which is precisely what you're saying. But if that sattva is maximized and all that's in the mind, even if you're acting the world, is Atman, 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 Bhagavan, 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 and everything in the mind is supporting that, then even though it's not technically, metaphysically, it's not technically beyond the guna, beyond the mind, fair enough. That's the point you're making. But practically speaking, they say it becomes Brahmanized. And they give the example of putting iron in a fire, it becomes red hot. So therefore, practically it's fire because it's heat emitting like fire and it's radiant like fire. Technically, it's still an iron bar. So technically, the mind, when it's absolutely absorbed in jnana, if you're a Atman seeker, or Bhagavan, if you're a bhakta, technically it's still a prakritic mind, but it's become so transformed that you can sort of say it's transcended the gunas. That's the best I can do.
Thank you.
Any more questions, comments, friends? There's Ellen up there. Ellen, you're going to send me another nice, beautiful, she sent me such a beautiful, you know, when people see that picture, they brings tears to their eyes. I've seen, they just love it. That picture of, you know, the little gopas and so forth. So I have it in a very special place. It was a very beautiful picture. So is everybody okay up there?
Yes, thank you for this evening. Thank you.
Okay, have a great evening, everybody. I'm just going to have a quick look in the chat in case there's anything I need to be aware of. And you can all log off and have a great evening. And I'd kind of like to do Bhagavatam forever, you know. Do this regularly. I don't mind doing a Vedanta Sutra course just so you can tick that off your box of, you know, your list of things to read. But honestly, you know, if there's enough interest, we could really do Bhagavatam very regularly. Maybe not every single week. I mean, we'll finish up this course, but then I'd be open to doing it, you know, maybe, well, we'll see. If there's enough interest, I would do it even every week, you know, forever. Just read the Bhagavatam. Have a great evening, everybody.
I have a question about this, if you don't mind.
Yes.
When you talk about Vedanta Sutra, but have you read the Baladeva version of the Vedanta Sutra?
Have I read the what?
The Baladeva version, the Baladeva commentaries.
I have, you know, I haven't read it with a microscope. I mean, clearly Baladev is Krishnaizing everything. There's Krishna everywhere, and that's the vision of a Mahabhagavata. A Mahabhagavata sees Krishna everywhere. So he's thoroughly Krishnaized the very sparse verses of the Vedanta Sutra, which is his dharma as a theologian. I have read it, yes. I think in terms of what's the closest to the Veda, most scholars would say the Veda. Of course, the Gaudiyas would say it's Achintya Veda. I think Ramanuja is probably the closest to and I think many scholars would agree Ramanuja is the closest to the real, you know, the real hugging. Obviously, Ramanujan, his private life is just like Baladev. He's a Vaishnava and, you know, kirtan and the rest of it. But when he's doing the Dharma, he respects the Vedanta Sutra. He's not he never mentions Vishnu. A couple of times he mentions Narayana, but he's not pushing it. He's really, really, really trying to respect, you know, the actual sutras and the references in the Upanishads. Because remember, whatever's in the Vedanta Sutra is coming from the Upanishads, and there's no Krishna in the Upanishads. There's one reference to Krishna, and it's probably not the Krishna of the Bhagavatam, because he has a different guru, and it's just weird. He has, it's a very, very different Krishna. So if you really, what Ramanuja is doing, what Baladev is doing, you know, centuries later are two different things, because they had two different intellectual landscapes. Ramanuja's hugging that. Remember, the Vedanta, every single sutra is actually a verse in the Upanishads. So if you want to say every sutra is talking about Krishna, you're saying the entire Upanishads are talking about Krishna. If you're a Mahabhagavata, you see it that way. But the words are not directly Krishna, they're indirectly. You're indirectly making those devotional connections. So for me, I don't need to read Baladev, because if I want Krishna, I'm going to read the Bhagavad Purana. I don't need to read a Krishnaized, and I understand what he's doing, and it needs to be there, and it's out there, and it's fine. Gaudiyas needed to have their commentary to be an accepted Vedanta tradition. You have to have a commentary on the Vedanta Sutras, and that's just what it means to be a Vedantic tradition. Someone in your lineage sooner or later has to come up with a commentary. So Baladev did that, and he took care of that. But for me personally, that doesn't nourish me. I don't need that. I'd rather, if I want to actually try to understand what the Vedanta is saying, I would read Ramanuja, because I think that's closer to Badarayana. And then if I want my Krishna, then I might read Baladev, some other thing he's written, but I wouldn't read his Vedanta Sutra, because he's doing something that he needed to do that's not necessary for me, but he needed to do it for his time and place. That's how I see it, Zoltan. Okay, everybody?
Thank you.
Okay, so Jai Sri Radhe Shyam.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you really, I'll announce it next week. Okay, take care.
Good night.